While Roland is about to hit the sack, we catch all the witches gathered in one room. They're grilling Nightingale, asking if they can dodge the agony of maturity by using their magic powers every single day. Nightingale shoots back that Anna and Nana are living proof of this theory. She claims she's spotted changes in both girls' bodies using her fog. Their consistent magic use has beefed up their magic vitality, and at the same time, softened the pain of anti-phase. Or you can call it maturity as well. She doubles down, saying if they burn through all their magic right before their awakening, they'll breeze through the anti-phase with almost no pain at all. Wendy chimes in too, confirming they never got to exhaust their powers in the past because they were always on the run from the church and never dared to unleash their full abilities. Lady Leaf finally understands why she felt no pain during her own anti-phase. She suffered while making her way back to the association. It was probably because her magic was exhausted after battling those demons. Once Lady Leaf finally understands the cause of their suffering due to the anti-phase, she is terrified to realize that there was no holy mountain they were chasing after. However, Wendy immediately reassures her that the holy mountain may not be a physical heaven-like place. Instead, this town is more than the holy mountain to every witch because there is no discrimination here. A witch then suggests that if all this turns out to be true, then perhaps other witches might have also found their way around anti-phase. However, she reveals that she had sent letters to the other witch associations in the kingdoms of Wolfheart and Daw, but received no replies. Nightingale reveals that Roland is trying to gather all the other witches by spreading rumors in the cities about this town being the holy mountain, hoping they'll gain confidence and come to this place too. Another witch admits she still doesn't understand Prince Roland's motives, questioning why he's taking an interest in them. One lady speculates he might want them as dancers like other nobles. Nightingale gets mad at this portrayal of our heroic prince and tells everyone they'll understand him better once they've lived here longer. Wendy agrees, speaking from her experience living there, vouching for Prince Roland. She advises them to be prepared to sign a working contract with the prince tomorrow. So, the next day rolls around, and everyone gathers in the dining room. Prince Roland lays down the law, telling everyone to carefully read through the contract details before scribbling their names. He urges them to start practicing their abilities according to the plans in the contract. Lady Moon pipes up nervously, worried she'll mess things up during her practice once again, like that time she almost bonked Lady Lily with an iron pan. Roland quickly reassures her, saying he will assist her in her training. He then tells Lady Scroll, Leaf, and Lady Soraya they are going to meet him privately. Later on, we find ourselves in our hero's office, where he starts his questioning. He kicks things off asking about the incident where they encountered creepy creatures, and only 7 witches made it out alive, including the teacher from the association who bit the dust in the Badlands. He wants to know if those things they saw were hybrids. Everyone clams up, especially Lady Leaf, who faced those beasts alone. She trembles a bit and finally speaks up, and states that they weren't demons but more like devils from the underworld. She mentions that they had tall frames and they could control demons, and they had magic as well, just like witches. The boy turns to Lady Soraya, asking if she was there when those monsters showed up. Anxiously, she confirms, and our hero slides a paper towards her, urging her to sketch out what the monster looked like. If you're confused about if Sister Leaf was the only survivor, then how did Soraya see those monsters? To clarify, Lady Leaf allowed some of the witches to retreat while she fought the monsters. Anyway, Lady Soraya conjures her special pen, leaving Roland in awe of her skill. She starts sketching, and with some deft strokes, what appears on the paper terrifies both our hero and Nightingale. Soraya feels drained after completing the drawing, and Lady Leaf wastes no time pointing out that the monsters in the picture are exactly the devils they encountered. She explains how one devil could throw javelins at lightning speed, while another could summon lightning itself, all alongside their immense physical strength. Lady Leaf also notes their weakness. They couldn't sustain their special attacks continuously, which she exploited to defeat them solo. Roland is shocked to hear that Lady Leaf took on those monsters alone. She then clarifies that she discovered a weakness under the devil's masks, a tube that was vulnerable. Kara's snakes bit the tube, severing it and causing the monster to perish, though it also cost Kara her life. So, the Lady Leaf used the same strategy to defeat another monster, discovering that there was red gas inside the tubes, which dissipated and caused their deaths. Prince Roland quickly realizes this sounds exactly like a respiratory system. But looking at the pictures, he's unsure if these creatures are aliens. Their skills and weapons don't seem to match up with typical alien descriptions. She then reveals they also encountered a floating city in the sky. No matter how much they tried to approach it, it always remained distant. Lady Leaf points out that the floating city might be a mirage. Our hero asks if they can draw it, because if it's actually a mirage, then the real devils could be somewhere in the Badlands, and the red blood mist above the city is what the devils breathe. Soraya starts drawing again, while Prince Roland considers that the flatlands to the west of the mountain range are unknown territories, so it's not surprising that other beings might live there. He then turns to Lady Scroll, asking about the ancient text Kara read about searching for the Holy Mountain. The girl explains that Kara never let anyone read it, but she once peeked at it. However, the text is scrambled and sloppy, and its contents are unimaginable. Prince Roland instructs Sister Scroll to recreate the ancient script for him, but she insists it's misleading nonsense and shouldn't be delved into. Despite her reservations, she conjures up a book as commanded, quickly closing it and explaining it's meant for his eyes only, fearing others might end up crazy like Kara. The prince nods, and later we find Nightingale snacking while Roland immerses himself in the book created by Sister Scroll. He asks Nightingale if she's not curious to see it, to which she simply walks away, uninterested in anything that might mess with someone's head. Roland argues that reading text won't drive anyone insane, and besides, he can't fully understand most of it because its language and grammar are archaic. He points out there's no mention of a holy mountain so far, only references to a bloody crimson moon and a massive stone door. He can decipher each word individually, but piecing them together is proving challenging. Suddenly, his eyes go wide as he gets something crucial from the text. The line he reads states that, "We regular humans don't stand a chance against these devils." Roland keeps reading from the book, telling how the divine stone of judgment couldn't hold up against the devil's relentless attacks. These monstrous enemies, scary as heck just with their brute strength, brought down the holy city of Tequila. They scattered all over, climbing mountains and crossing rivers to escape the underworld's door. The writer then spills that she's on her deathbed, being eaten alive by the devil's power. No medicine can help, so she's writing to her buddy Nataya for a favor. She explains how Alice's Judgment Army experiment is wrapping up, successful in making warriors who can stand toe-to-toe with the devils. But she's afraid even if they beat the devils, it won't be a real win. It'll just spell disaster. She begs Nataya to shut down Alice's Judgment Army, believing only Nataya can make that call. Once he reads all of this, Roland grabs his head in utter confusion. He speculates that Kara might have mistaken devils for witches, believing witches would reign supreme and prompting her to bring down the church's army. But he's still confused by how Kara had planned to overcome the Divine Stone's power, which is effective against witches, but useless against devils. With that knowledge in mind, at least he now knows the devils mentioned are a separate species, not witches. Still puzzled, Roland wonders when the church fought these devils and what kind of place Tequila is. He's frustrated with the original Roland for not taking studies seriously, leaving him with a disappointingly empty brain focused only on pleasures. He turns to Nightingale, asking if she knows where Kara found the book that drove her mad. Nightingale explains Kara already had the book when she joined the association, but she points out that, according to Wendy, the association was started by some witches who happened to meet in a sea breeze town. Nightingale explains that Kara, Wendy, and Scroll are the original members of their group. They discovered ancient underground ruins in the eastern forest near a town, but only Kara investigated further and claimed to have found the book there. After this discovery, the association expanded, and the church caught wind of their association and began a manhunt. Kara fled to the mountain range in search of the Holy Mountain, and that's the extent of their association's history. She then asks Roland if he's up for checking out the ruins. Roland shakes his head, saying the eastern forest is too far, and he'd rather focus on developing his territory than wandering off. Roland has another idea brewing, setting up a proper organization. He assures them it won't be like before, obsessing over holy mountains. Instead, it'll be a witch union, all about managing witches responsibly, no crimes or dodging the law with the use of power. Just freedom and happiness for all. The next scene takes us to the Longsong Fortress, where a grand noble gathering is in full swing. Among the attendees is Perov, the ambassador, who marvels at how this celebration mirrors the lavish banquets of the capital. He's certain that it took considerable effort from the Elk family to gather guests from such prestigious backgrounds at Longsong Fortress. In the background, we see a blonde guy telling her sister to approach the ambassador, but she is too embarrassed to do such a thing. So, the blonde then unexpectedly addresses the ambassador as Buddy. The ambassador bristles at the informal greeting, while this newcomer insists they're old friends and tells him not to be so uptight. He teasingly asks Perov ambassador if he wasn't appointed by the leader of Longsong Fortress, then jokes about the profitability of the mines at the border town, implying they must be raking in money from the locals. Perov quickly dodges the question, but the loudmouth keeps blabbing, sharing how he was headed to the holy city but got stuck in a blizzard, which probably saved his life. Curious, the redhead asks for clarification. The blonde reveals that the new holy city nearly fell, with demons breaching the inner city. If the church hadn't sent their strongest warriors, the holy city's church would have been in big trouble. He adds that all the armies in the 4 great kingdoms suffered heavy losses, with few returning from Frost Valley. In just a month, many women were left widowed, and now those widows are easy prey, with anyone able to take advantage of them for just 2 silver coins. If you can't recall, we've seen these tough church soldiers clash before in previous chapters. I hope that rings a bell. The blonde guy is pretty convinced this is all part of the church's plan, where the 4 biggest kingdoms lost their generals and warriors in this war with demons and Hermes. Suddenly, a newcomer asks the ambassador if he noticed a handkerchief in his invitation. The ambassador gets a bit peeved and asks if there's some mischief going on. The blonde guy reassures him, joking that if he wanted to tease him, he'd have included socks instead. He then mentions the handkerchiefs were sewn by his sister, who turned 16 right after today's shindig. Seems like the brother's eager to pair his sister up with this redhead, despite their big age gap. Suddenly, someone starts shouting, and all eyes turn to see a noble throwing insults and curses at our hero with every name in the book. Perov steps forward and inquires about the commotion. A man explains they are discussing the owner of the border town who has seized properties from the aristocrats. A curly-haired noble then steps forward to clarify directly to the ambassador. He reveals he resides in the border town but seeks refuge at Longsong Fortress each winter during the demon months. This year, however, every noble from the border town has been informed that Prince Roland has demolished their homes to build a wall and isn't providing any compensation. What's more troubling, Prince Roland has branded those who fled to Longsong Fortress as traitors for abandoning their prince and territory. Returning to Longsong Fortress now means facing the death penalty for treason. The ambassador quickly catches on that Prince Roland is probably aiming to cut his ties from Longsong Fortress completely to make his territory self-sustaining. Meanwhile, the noble keeps on bashing Prince Roland's moves, hoping Mr. Medi can help them get a message to the Longsong Fortress Duke to help them. Medi steps in coolly, telling everyone to chill because Duke Ryan is already on it. He boasts how the Duke's been building up an army and the Elk family is also ready to help in this cause. The border town's nobles are relieved, stating that if Duke Ryan is handling this directly, they have nothing to worry about. But the ambassador isn't thrilled about attacking Prince Roland. He pulls Medi aside, reminding him they're talking about a prince here. The blondie shrugs it off, calling Roland a prince who owns a patch of dirt and assures the ambassador that Roland will surrender once they face him. Despite all the reassurances, Perov isn't exactly thrilled about the situation. His friend keeps hammering home that if they march into the border town with a huge army, all those farmers and miners will scatter like ants, so the battle will be over before it could begin. But Perov's main worry is that Longsong Fortress will be the one to take the brunt of this conflict, not Prince Roland. He can't quite wrap his head around how Prince Roland will use regular folks to take on the Duke's army, but he has this uneasy feeling that Roland will come out on top somehow. Later on, Perov swings back to the Honeysuckle family in the Longsong Fortress. He greets his father, who tells him to grab a rundown on their imports, exports, and available labor. It seems they need to prepare for the Duke's army in the spring. The ambassador is shaken to realize they're dead serious about taking on the border town. His old man tells him Duke Ryan's already called for recruits once the snow melts, and all 5 major families got to pitch in knights and soldiers to back him up there. Perov asks his father how many soldiers they're sending. The old man, kinda surprised Perov's suddenly interested, lays out the knights and common workers they're sending, which are over 100 men in total. Perov gets really worked up hearing this, and begs his father not to hit the battlefield. The Baldy asks why, and Perov just says straight up he's worried sick about his old man's safety. Hearing that, the Baldy starts laughing his ass off at Perov's concern. He considers Longsong Fortress to be an elephant ready to squash the border town like a measly ant, so he ain't sweating it. He reminds Perov that Prince Roland only got a handful of knights and maybe 50 guards. But the redhead ambassador keeps his protest. He points out how everyone underestimated Roland's mud wall, thinking it would crumble after a night's rain. But surprisingly, it held strong. People also doubted the border town would not survive the winter, but Roland stood his ground till the end of the months of demons, earning everyone's respect. The Baldy gets more riled up hearing this and tells his son to shut it. He points angrily at the portraits on the wall, his tough-as-nails ancestors who stood firm in the battlefield. And as their descendant, he's not backing down from any battlefield either. The poor son couldn't help but take his father's insults, who just doesn't seem to get how unpredictable Prince Roland can be. He's pretty convinced it won't be long before Honeysuckle gets tangled up in this fancy politics and gets devoured by our prince. Back at the border town's castle, our hero reveals to us that he's kept his promise and granted some land to Nana's father, Tiggy Pine, making him a viscount. The land, south of the river across from town, is still dense forest for now, but Roland promised it would be the first to develop once the border town expands. Every business share on this land will belong to the Pine family, and surprisingly, the big man agreed wholeheartedly, opting to enjoy his undeveloped forest for hunting until then. On the other hand, Roland also officially bestowed knighthood upon Brian, and he will win land every time he racks up military achievements. Our prince has finally figured out an effective way to utilize his desolate land. With the river as a boundary, the area between it and the mountain range will serve as a military training ground. On the other side of the river, he plans to establish future factories and agriculture. He also intends to utilize the forest to the west of the border town, rich in lumber, edible fungi, wild animals, and medicinal herbs. Just then, someone enters. Well, it seems Sister Soraya has been summoned by our hero. The prince greets her warmly, motioning for her to come closer and sit down. He asks her about the progress on her work at the city hall. It turns out our hero tasked her to draw passport-sized images of everyone in the border town to compile a comprehensive report. Each person received 10 bronze coins just for sitting in front of her and posing for these sketches, and Soraya, still puzzled by the whole affair, diligently drew every visitor. But right now, our hero has called her in today for a different task. When Sister Soraya asks what he has in mind, the prince eagerly slams his hands on the table and tells her happily to draw a few trinkets just for fun. Soraya is a bit confused by this unusual request, but she agrees nonetheless. She asks if she should draw them from her imagination. Roland instructs her to draw a soldier holding a heavy crossbow on the paper. Soraya picks up her magical pen, and Roland specifies to draw the soldier in armor, detailing his environment. Looks like my guy has found the perfect way to use a ChatGPT-like bot to generate images for him. Anyway, the lady starts drawing anxiously while the prince watches closely. Once she finishes, he takes a look and remarks that it's surprisingly realistic. He then instructs her to draw a small circle at the top and middle of the card. Soraya follows his instructions as he continues to give commands on what she should draw. Eventually, after making one card, he tells her to create an entire deck and promises to teach her how to play with the cards. After creating those cards, he decides to play the first round with her, and they end up spending the entire day immersed in the game. The prince clinches the final round by slamming down his most powerful ace up his sleeve, leaving Soraya taken aback by its sheer power. She challenges him to another round, but he decides to postpone it for another day as it's already getting late. Soraya feels a bit disappointed, but agrees nonetheless. As the yellow hue of dawn settles in, a sweet melody fills the air, and Sister Soraya quickly recognizes it as Lady Echo's singing. She explains that it seems Lady Echo has learned the poem Soraya had taught her. We also catch up with Anna after a long time, and she seems to be enjoying that sweet singing. Lady Scroll walks into the scene and informs Anna that Sister Soraya is calling everyone. Anna replies that she wants to read more and is also enjoying Sister Echo's singing. Purplehead then reveals that even Echo admires Anna for her abilities among all the witches here. In response, our Anna asks why. Lady Scroll explains that Echo isn't from Grey Castle but hails from the southernmost continent. She was brought to Grey Castle by slave traders from Clearwater Port, where she was trained in techniques to seduce men to fetch higher prices. Though her current life is better, her past remains a mystery which was full of sorrow, and she was torn from her family and landed far away from home. Anna feels sad for her, and Lady Scroll adds that for Echo, having a power like Anna's is like winning the lottery, considering her singing isn't exactly a career booster. The sister then gives our girl a reassuring pat, saying she doesn't need to worry about anything since witches are no longer desperate and destitute in this place. Anna, being the first witch our hero met, gets all the credit from Lady Scroll for becoming a reason for comfort to the others. Purplehead notices something that creeps Anna out. She points out that her hair is a bit long and asks if nobody has cut it. Anna blushes, saying she cuts it herself all the time. Lady Scroll assures her that she's going to give her a proper haircut and proudly claims that back in the association, she was the one who cut every sister's hair. After a while, she brings her tools, ties Anna's hair with a cloth, and proceeds to cut it while telling her that she used to make a living with this barber profession. Anna then hesitantly asks a question, mentioning that the book she read yesterday had many stories where the prince always ends up marrying the princess and making her his wife. She asks why the prince always has to marry the duke's daughter. Sister Scroll explains that's just how things are, but Anna immediately questions why, asking what if a person doesn't like princesses or noble ladies. Sister Scroll responds that regardless of personal preference, the prince would still have to marry someone of noble blood because it's likely he will become king, and a king's marriage is dictated by political affairs. Additionally, it's crucial for a king to have pure-blood offspring. Anna is definitely thrown off by this revelation because she might have been hoping for a chance to marry Prince Roland. But I guess she doesn't have a shot since witches can't reproduce. Even Lady Scroll understands that much, and she doesn't want Anna to feel upset about it. Once she is finally done cutting her hair, Anna looks cute and beautiful, and Lady Scroll decides to change her stories from now on. She tells Anna that she's heading back to her room and instructs her to come find her if she reads anything she doesn't understand. But before she can leave, Anna speaks up again, saying our prince isn't like the ones in the stories, because he does what he wants, no matter what. Purplehead asks why she thinks that way. Anna reminds her that if he were just any prince, he wouldn't have saved her. A while later, we see our prince holding a piece of paper with the Pythagorean theorem written on it. He teaches Sister Scroll a bit about algebra and tells her he'll be writing a few more equations for her to memorize. The prince asks if she gets it, and the lady nods, takes a deep breath, and uses her ability to memorize the equation. Looks like our hero is trying to preserve his math knowledge before his memory declines. Since he was an engineer in his past life, he knows a lot about math and physics and has some basic knowledge of other subjects. So, He's making Scroll memorize the contents he wrote to preserve this knowledge, hoping it can be used in the future to promote education. Meanwhile, he still hasn't figured out what magic really is in this world. Magic is abundant here, and witches use it to bend the natural laws in ways he can't simply compare to other energy sources like electricity. The only way to truly learn about the origin of magic power is to understand the universe itself. He starts thinking about Einstein's discoveries and all that jazz, and figures that maybe scientists in his world had already stumbled upon this magical power, but they had no way to prove its existence since there were no witches around. Suddenly, his daydreaming is interrupted by Lady Scroll, and as the hours pass by, our hero decides to call it a day. The girl gets up from her spot, but before she leaves, she says she's got a question she wants to ask. The boy gives her the go-ahead to speak. So she asks him why he decided to take witches in, and if he wasn't scared of the church threatening him. Roland kinda saw that one coming, but he almost chokes over his tea when she asks if he'd ever marry a witch. While wiping his face, he asks why she had to ask such a random question. But then he starts picturing what it would be like to marry a witch, and memories of Anna flash through his mind. All those nice memories make him grin, and after imagining it, he happily says he'd totally marry a witch. As the night deepens outside, we see Nightingale in her night attire, ready to hit the sack. Damn, I would love to stare at her big hooters, and you can do as well. Just pause the video. Anyway, Wendy, with her eyes always closed, asks where Nightingale is lost in thought and wonders if something good happened because she rarely ever sees her smiling like that. The scene then shifts back to earlier, when Sister Scroll asked the question about whether the hero would marry a witch. It turns out Nightingale was eavesdropping on their conversation, and upon hearing the prince's response, she lights up with a hope. Meanwhile, in the present, Wendy persistently asks the source of her happy smile and wonders if she won a good game of cards. The next day arrives, and we see our soldiers being grilled by their captain, Iron Axe. He's diligently putting them through their paces, and the chief knight is amazed at the energy these guys are exuding. He remembers how, before winter, they were just a bunch of miners and hunters with lazy attitudes, but now they've transformed into full-blown warriors. Still, he knows that once these men taste their first battle, they'll truly become soldiers. Prince Roland arrives at the scene and asks Knight Carter about the progress. The knight says training is going well, but curiously asks about the woman beside him, wondering if she's a witch. The prince happily confirms this and instructs his knight to gather everyone because he has something to announce. The knight immediately calls the soldiers to line up, and once everyone is gathered, our hero begins to speak, first greeting everyone warmly. Out of the blue, Hunter Iron Axe leaps forward like a devil ready to take a life, and Knight Carter immediately goes on high alert, rushing to protect the prince. Suddenly, the man falls to his knees and bows before the witch, calling her clan leader. Everyone present is shocked to hear this news. The scene immediately transitions to a time when a fire dances across the area. We see a young guy with a giant axe cutting down people, and we also witness the same witch screaming in horror as this filthy man's blade claims her most loyal servant. After that, he arrogantly turns to her and asks if she's the last member of the Osha clan. He challenges her to a sacred duel, telling her to stop resisting because her clan has fallen, and her brother and father slain by his hands. According to the rules, he reminds her, her clan will now become his slaves. Looks like her loyal subordinate, Iron Axe, is still alive. So, as this creep makes his move and grabs her chest, her servant steps up, telling him to back off. But bam! Someone decks the guy from behind really hard, and he goes down like a sack of potatoes. This filthy guy keeps humiliating her by stepping over her body. He orders his buddies to haul her off to Clearwater Port, thinking they've hit the jackpot. Meanwhile, her servant is barely hanging on, slowly closing his eyes as consciousness fades away, and the bad guys start loading up their things to make their getaway. In the present moment, Iron Axe further reveals that after losing her, he refused to join any other clan. His sole goal became saving Lady Echo. He explains how he searched countless slave markets all the way from the far south Clearwater Port, but found no leads. He drops to his knees, swearing to the three gods he'll stick to Prince Roland's side for the rest of his life. He admits he failed to control himself when he saw her, so he feels deserving of punishment. The prince steps in, telling him to chill and to get up. The prince then hints that maybe helping the Iron Axe get his revenge for his clan isn't out of the question. Iron Axe lights up, asking if they're really going for it. The prince confirms, saying it's not happening right now, but they will be in future. Iron Axe is thrilled by this news and reassures Lady Echo that she'll eventually be able to return to their homeland. She responds by stating that she's no longer the clan leader. Well, it now finally makes sense why she admired Anna for having powerful magical abilities, because she wanted to stand up for her clan, but she was too powerless against those intruders. Meanwhile, our hero is lost in his own thoughts because what Iron Axe described about the extreme south is really intriguing. Basically, in the south, there is a black goo that flows from the ground and burns for days without evaporating. As he thinks harder, his face lights up as he realizes that he's found an oil jackpot, Not just some underground stuff, but a full-on oil fountain. The mere thought of oil has him dreaming of jets and fast cars, because he knows he can bring combustion engines into the mix if he's got oil. So, the prince casually drops that once he's king, he'll allocate resources to claim the extreme south for the Osha clan. Iron Axe practically breaks into a happy dance, thanking our hero and swearing to follow his lead. However, the prince gets serious and reminds Iron Axe that his actions today broke the rules of the First Army, so he's been sentenced to 2 days of lockup. Our army captain takes it in stride and agrees to his punishment. Later on, we find ourselves out in the woods. One of the soldiers asks their buddy what's up with Captain Iron Axe. The buddy corrects him, saying to call him team leader, because the prince wants everyone using their ranks. He then explains Iron Axe's situation, and they hope our hero won't come down too hard on him. As the soldier ponders this, Prince casually strolls up with his crew. Carter snaps everyone to attention, and the soldiers quietly chat about Iron Axe's absence. The prince steps forward and addresses everyone, informing them that their training was paused. Once he finishes what he came to say, they should continue their training. He reveals that the woman next to him is Witch Echo, Iron Axe's long-lost relative. He explains that due to their captain's unreasonable actions, he has been sentenced to 2 days of imprisonment. He emphasizes once again that everyone here is among the First Army's finest soldiers, and a fundamental rule of being a soldier is to follow orders. To drive his point home, the prince asks if they understand, and the soldiers respond with crisp voices, saying yes. Echo then pulls back her hoodie, revealing herself, while the prince continues explaining that she can simulate various sounds, including musical instruments and marching songs. He instructs that her simulated commands will guide their movements, keeping everyone in formation. The soldiers appear puzzled by the concept of these marching songs. Once Echo dramatically tosses aside her robe, the prince adds that in battle, she'll be their banner, like a VIP at a rock show, but for war. He stresses that everyone needs to guard her like their favorite guitar. With the formalities done, Echo starts belting out her song. Her sweet melody floats through the air, and it's not just any random tune but a battle anthem to rally the troops forward. In the middle of the night, the soldiers stand on guard duty when suddenly an arrow pierces one soldier's heart out of the blue. Before they can react, more arrows find their marks, leaving the remaining soldiers screaming in agony. There stands the would-be king, Timothy, clad in golden armor from head to toe, leading an army of thousands of knights. His companions praise him for attacking his sister in the dead of night while she might be sleeping, but Timothy corrects them, saying she's awake now because he purposely sent a diversion army on the main road while bringing elite knights in from the east to catch her off guard. He mentions that even if she wants to escape now, she can't move at night. His knight agrees, stating that withdrawing troops at night is a big taboo, and if she tries it, her whole crew will crumble like cookies. But then, the twisted brother reveals he knows his sister well, confident she'll cowardly flee, leaving her citizens behind to be butchered. But he is sure that he will catch her, dead set that she won't slip his grasp even if she makes it to Clearwater Port. The knight lays out their battle plan. He'll hit Eagle City hard while Timothy hunts for Garcia. With the plan set, Timothy pumps up his soldiers, telling them to wave the Grey Castle Kingdom's flag high. They charge toward the frightened soldiers, knocking them down before they can even think of running. The knight grins at the chaos, promising their king they'll scatter their enemies like dust. Timothy scans the surroundings in search of his other knight, Francis, who was supposed to lead the diversion as a decoy. Since Francis hasn't returned yet, the king is convinced that the greedy bastard must be off plundering Garcia's treasures for himself. Suddenly, his knight's face goes pale as he points his finger at front. Once he looks in that direction, they see a silhouette of a massive army, which is led by Garcia Wimbledon, proudly waving her flag as Queen of Clearwater. With confidence in her tone, she rallies her soldiers not to fear, and they raise their spears, ready for action. While she smiles confidently, her brother, however, is totally pissed off to see there with her army. But even as confident as she might be, he's sure that this will be the last time she acts brave, because he's looking forward to destroying her and her army. Meanwhile, we're at the entrance of Garcia's Eagle City, and there we spot Francis. As he enters the city, he sees terrified locals who immediately shut their doors and windows upon seeing the platoon. Francis is starting to get suspicious by now. He knows the third princess isn't dumb enough to leave the walls undefended. Suddenly, his nose picks up a weird smell, and he tells everyone, "It stinks here. Head to the town hall." Well, it seems like something is indeed rotting inside the sewerage. Once they reach the town hall, the knight enters the hall along with his soldiers. A while later, the soldier tells the Duke they've searched the basement but found nothing valuable. Well, the Duke flips out, kicking stuff violently around. He finally realizes it was her plan all along. If she had been in a hurry to retreat, she wouldn't have ransacked the entire castle for valuables. It looks like she was prepared to abandon the city long before. Right on cue, he gets more bad news, which is that the north gate is on fire. He rushes outside to see flames blazing and smoke billowing. The knight tells the soldiers to stay calm and get people to extinguish the fire. But the soldier shouts that it's spreading and water won't do a thing. Hearing this, Duke Francis is shocked once again. The soldier explains that not only will water not put it out, but it will actually spread the flames further. Another soldier suddenly appears, likely with some bad news, revealing that the fire has already reached the city and their troops can't contain it. It's spreading fast. The knight is shocked once again, and this time he's utterly terrified. When he thinks about unstoppable fire, only the work of witches comes to mind, and he's sure that Garcia is enlisting their help. Still, he rallies his soldiers not to panic and tells them that this demonic fire is cast by the witches under Garcia's command. He mounts his horse and rallies the soldiers to follow, because they're going to make it out of this place alive by passing through the flames. They zoom through those screaming flames, the knight yelling for everyone to keep moving, convinced they've got the divine stone of judgment backing them up. They push on through the firestorm. Buildings are crumbling left and right, but the Duke leaps over every obstacle like a hero. After finally getting out of the first wave of flames, he turns to reassure his soldiers they've made it, only to see them already swallowed by fire. He trembles, staring at the stone, wondering why the heck the divine stone of judgment didn't do a darn thing. He watches the city crumble around him, despair sinking in as he fears being crushed by the falling debris. Once taking a bird's-eye view, we see the entire Eagle City appears burned to a crisp. Finally, the Duke emerges alive from the gate, though his feet tremble and he's covered in bruises. Realizing the divine stone of judgment didn't protect them, he knows it wasn't the work of witches. While he collapses to his knees, a giant axe-wielding figure appears, and the Duke confirms to us that they are the Sand People. As he trembles for his fate, the man before him raises his axe and brutally chops his head off. Meanwhile, back with Timothy and his soldiers, both armies prepare for battle. As Grey Castle forces advance, Garcia's soldiers take their positions. The clash erupts into a brutal bloodbath for these unfortunate people. People from both sides are slashing and stabbing, total mayhem as a soldier tries to charge towards the queen, sitting all regal on her throne surrounded by those sandfolks. She just raises her hand, doesn't even bother to say a word, and with a flick of her finger, those sand dudes rush forward and chop the horse's legs clean off in one go. Poor soldier hits the dirt, and before he can even blink, the sand guy swings his axe again, ending him with one brutal whack. Timothy's crew starts freaking out. There's another whole army staring them down. It's those folks from the southernmost region, where Lady Echo and our Captain Iron Axe hailed from. And since the southernmost region is full of oil, I have started to think that the inferno in the city was sparked by oil. Which is why it's no wonder Duke Francis couldn't snuff it out. These sand dwellers raise their axes high and charge straight at Timothy's army, swinging and stabbing with deadly precision, cutting through soldiers like they're slicing cucumbers. It's not a battle anymore. It's a one-sided massacre. The sand dudes dominate the whole scene with their sheer power. Lady just smiles, watching the chaos unfold, while Timothy's face shows pure terror and horror. He bites his nails, unable to think clearly. Ordering his knight to sound the horn and regroup, the knight grimly states it's already too late. Timothy keeps nervously biting his nails, urging his soldiers to retreat. He bolts in the opposite direction on his horse, still cocky even after biting the dust, convinced he'll get this sister next time. After that messy showdown between those two stubborn siblings fighting over territories like kids arguing over ice cream, we head back to the border town. And it looks like Prince Roland is gearing up to face Longsong Fortress. He's pretty sure Longsong is trying to strike now because they think the border town's at its weakest, right after the demon months. But our hero's been ready for this. There's not a ton of gunpowder in storage, but it should be enough to fend off the siege. He's wrestling with whether he'll move into Longsong Fortress once he wins. Well, probably not. Because dealing with those trash nobles would be a nightmare. Better to stay cozy in his border town and develop it further with Longsong's resources. Just thinking about all the labor and skilled craftsmen he'll have after winning the war puts a smile on his face. He's itching to outwit Longsong's Duke Ryan in the war to squeeze every penny from him, and the thought alone has him drooling. Suddenly he senses something heading towards him, and lighting takes him down after crashing through the window, giving him a gut-busting blow right into his chest. After recovering, the boy eagerly asks for an update. Lightning happily reports that Longsong Fortress is advancing. The army marches forward, each knight gleaming in shining armor, while Duke Ryan leads the charge. One of his advisors, with sleepy eyes, suggests to Duke Ryan that they rest for the night before launching an attack on Bordertown soon. Duke Ryan playfully retorts that he'll sleep in his large castle bed tonight, right after defeating Bordertown. He jokes that a second-rate place like Bordertown will be an easy conquest. However, Baldy beside him interjects, noting their soldiers have been marching endlessly and are exhausted, so he suggests delaying the attack would be wiser. Moreover, since the prince made it through the demon months, he must have something up his sleeve, so they should be cautious. But instead of grasping the situation, this orange-haired guy scoffs that those monsters are probably a weak-ass bunch who couldn't even jump over Prince Roland's half-assed wall. The Duke agrees, mentioning how Hermes was almost overrun by demonic hybrids this year, while Bordertown just faced a few stray monsters and survived somehow. This guy believes that since Second Prince Timothy and Third Princess Garcia crippled each other's forces in Eagle City, and the city was burned, they both suffered heavy losses. He sees this as his chance to shine and unify the western region under his rule. He orders his lackey to send a message to our hero, offering safe escort back to the king's city if he surrenders. The knight responds that Roland's troops are already in formation and armed, clearly showing they won't surrender just through talks. The Duke whips out his telescope only to spot a handful of soldiers standing there. Even Baldy looks puzzled by their scattered formation and less than impressive weapons. A grin spreads across the Duke's face after seeing those weaklings. With his simple hand gesture, the whole army starts marching forward to take on this small group. As they get closer, Vanner is shocked to see the sheer number of enemy soldiers. He shakes off his fear with a slap to his own cheeks, rallying his buddies not to sweat it. He reminds them that they've beaten demonic beasts, so they can handle these humans as well. As the enemy troops draw near, Vanner pumps up his crew with pep talk, firing them up to face the challenge head-on. Meanwhile, up on the hill, our prince feels pretty darn confident about his witch-empowered army, and he believes that winning this showdown is key to revolutionizing things up in this world. Lightning snaps him out of his daydreaming, saying the enemy is inching closer and lets the entire army know about the approaching threat. Prince Roland finally gets serious and immediately commands to open fire. Right on cue, the soldiers ignite their cannon's strings, and cannonballs fire up immediately, coming straight at the frontline soldiers. As soon as they hit, soldiers scatter, not sure what the hell just hit them. These poor guys are terrified, thinking the prince just summoned thunder. Duke Ryan quickly dismisses their worries, telling them not to be fooled. He claims it's just a deception, just a noise, and no real damage was done. With that in mind, he orders the soldiers to simply charge at their enemy. But poor Duke Ryan's enthusiasm soon dies down when he sees another cannonball coming right at them. This time, it lands directly among the soldiers, taking everyone down like bowling pins. The soldiers relentlessly charge forward while cannonballs rain down like meteors from hell. Meanwhile, Duke Ryan still doesn't realize how deep in trouble he is, thinking that if they keep pushing, they'll break through the defense line and secure victory. As the knights dangerously approach, Vanner tells everyone to lower the angle of fire and load the grape shots. The soldiers quickly comply, and as the knights hover over their heads, the cannonball fires straight through a knight's belly, leaving him dead on the ground. Finally, these goons are absolutely terrified. As Sister Echo sings her anthem, the soldiers are filled with determination. They aim their guns and start shooting, hitting the soldiers in the head and chest. The poor soldiers immediately start running in the opposite direction to save their lives from these unknown things. Not gonna lie, I almost feel sorry for the enemy soldiers. They're getting butchered just because their leader is a thick-headed, arrogant, spoiled old man. While the leader grits his teeth in frustration, the orange-haired advisor claims they have no clue what kind of sorcery the prince is using and decides to retreat for now. Baldy agrees, saying they won't run out of firewood in these hills, so it's better to retreat. Meanwhile, the soldiers are doing their best to escape, but Duke Ryan immediately yells at them to stop retreating and even strikes down one of his own soldiers for running in the other direction. Despite all his pleas for his troops to stand their ground, the poor guys are just running for their lives to avoid being burned to a crisp in the scorching heat. Meanwhile, Prince Roland is quite happy with his victory, but it looks like the chief knight isn't thrilled about this kind of warfare. He says there's no honor in it, but Prince Roland immediately tells him not to feel down because they still need to keep chasing after Duke Ryan. It seems like Carter will have to get used to this new era of warfare, as the Age of Knights gives way to a new kind of battle. As the prince rides on his ship, he appears happy with the battle's outcome, which turned out better than he expected. If all goes well with troop movements at night, the Iron Axe and Rifle Company can launch a surprise attack on Duke Ryan tomorrow morning. He's excited about leading the first army in the world backed by technologically powerful witches, each playing their respective roles. Suddenly, Anna appears on the scene and asks why he's sporting such a creepy smile. He quickly brushes it off, saying it's nothing, but she moves closer to wipe the drool off his face. However, the prince immediately snatches the handkerchief and decides to clean up himself. The girl reminds our awkward prince they should hit the hay since it's already late. He agrees, but once they reach one of the ship's rooms, he's flustered to find everyone chilling in the same room. He's totally thrown off, wondering if they're all supposed to sleep in the same room because, let's face it, even for a harem, this is a bit much. As their DIY ship sails through the bright night, everyone seems to be sleeping soundly. Among the witches, our hero can't help but notice a certain pair of distracting attributes no matter where he looks. The ladies are just a bit too close for comfort, and he can't shake off the unease. Suddenly, he spots Anna wide awake, watching him like a curious puppy. He gives her a charming smile and playfully pinches her nose, deciding to teach her a trick to fall asleep. He tells her to start counting sheep jumping through hoops. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, and keep counting until she falls asleep. The girl immediately complies and starts counting. As she continues counting softly, the prince finds himself wide awake. Now he's having an even harder time falling asleep. Nightingale seems awake too, sneaking glances at him. The next day finally arrives, and Prince Roland gets dressed. Lady Leaf appears still sleepy and asks how everyone slept. Well, it seems Anna had a rough night. She still appears to be counting sheep even now and is about to hit the 100,000th sheep. The next scene takes you at Duke Ryan's resting place, where he angrily throws his wineglass down and demands to know how Prince Roland got his hands on such high-end weapons. He drills his soldiers, asking about those catapult-like things, which had more range than they've ever seen in any weapon. In reply, the terrified knight admits he's clueless. All he heard was thunderous claps, and suddenly the knights hit some invisible wall, tearing them apart in an instant. The orange head suggests it might involve witches, but Duke Ryan calls it bullshit, reminding his soldiers they had the divine stone of judgment for protection, so there is no way witches could attack them. Deciding to retreat for now since they might lose this war, Duke Ryan plans to gather more troops back at Longsong. Once ready, he intends to block all trade on the Redwater River, knowing Border Town won't last a month without food supplies. He orders everyone to prepare to return to Longsong Fortress by tomorrow. But it looks like their plans hit a snag, as Sister Echo's singing rattles everyone in the tent to their core. Before they can react, a massive explosion rocks the entire area. Duke Ryan storms out, demanding to know how the enemy caught up to them without anyone noticing them last night. The knight quickly brings a spare horse, and Duke Ryan wastes no time hopping on, sprinting away before things get even worse. But soon, he finds himself staring down gun barrels as Captain Ironaxe and his army stand before them. Instantly, our soldier pulls the trigger, and the bullet hits Duke Ryan square in the chest. He topples from his horse, kissing the ground with his face. He looks worse for wear, his groggy eyes catching a glimpse of our hero marching forward with his team, and he loses consciousness before he can see them clearly. After a while, we make a grand entrance inside the Longsong Fortress. Local soldiers scramble as they see our party crashing their party. They seem more scared of the witches walking alongside our hero. Night Carter reveals that the Duke's family tried escaping through the back door, but was captured by our first army. The prince lays down the law, saying all rebels and prisoners of war are to chill in the dungeon. Then, he gets this wild look and blurts out, "First things first, let's touch the corpse." Anna and Nightingale are creeped out to hear this and ask, "What kind of weird fetish is that?" The prince quickly backtracks, explaining he just meant looting the body, not getting all creepy with it. And so the first round of looting begins, and everyone dives into the loot. First up, they snag 300 shiny gold royals, followed by a special Clearwater port pearl necklace and some top-notch hides from the Wolf Heart Kingdom and Hermes' Godstones. But then they hit the jackpot, a hidden room. They press Y to open it, revealing a treasure trove filled with glittering gold items. The prince can't help but drool at the sight of so much wealth. Seeing chests stacked high with riches, he muses on how the lives of the rich are always so mundane. But he's not complaining, because he'd rather cry in a Ferrari than stress about paying rent any day. Suddenly, Night Carter bursts onto the scene, revealing that Ambassador Petrov Hill of the Honeysuckle family has already arrived at the castle. The prince is taken aback by this news, not expecting him to arrive so early. The knight and the other ladies scramble to tidy up all the loot as quickly as possible. Outside the gate, Ambassador Hill reluctantly makes his way into the castle. He's visibly anxious, imagining our hero smugly demanding ransom money in the exchange of his father. But once he finally faces our hero, Ambassador Petrov Hill sees Roland smiling pleasantly. The prince casually assures him that his father wasn't harmed since he surrendered first. Grateful, the ambassador thanks him and offers to pay any ransom the Honeysuckle family can afford. However, Prince Roland surprises him by declining any money, asking instead for livestock and people. Petrov quickly offers up cows, sheep, and horses, but admits that the Honeysuckle family is short on people. Prince Roland gets specific, listing out needs for bricklayers, stonemasons, blacksmiths, farmers, and serfs. He rattles off a long list of goods, which also lists down the alternatives for other specific items. He smugly tells poor Petrov that 1,000 sheep and 300 craftsmen would be a fair exchange, given the worth of the Honeysuckle family head. Petrov finds himself thinking hard, realizing he's got just a day to come up with a solution. But then, the prince hits him with bad news. He's under a tight deadline. Prince Roland casually mentions that Petrov has only a short time to decide what to provide from the list. He's not planning to stick around Longsong for more than a week, and will be heading back to Border Town soon. Petrov is thrown off by this news. If the prince leaves, who will run Longsong? He doubts Duke Ryan's kids can handle it either. He humbly asks if the humble prince wants someone to look after Longsong Fortress. The prince surprises Petrov, asking if he's interested in taking charge of Longsong. He explains they need someone or a family to oversee the territory. If the Honeysuckle family wants in, they'll be taxed by Border Town, which is 30% of their revenue plus 1,000 gold royal worth of goods and materials. Well, that's a tempting offer. Petrov thinks to himself as the prince casually lays a hand on his shoulder, hinting at the allure of power and opportunity the Honeysuckle family have. Roland suggests this could be Petrov's shot at real influence, but he's got a few questions first. First up, Roland asks how Petrov plans to handle any opposition. Anxious, Petrov counters with questions by asking the prince about his estimates of revenue and taxes of Longsong. The prince calmly insists that this is not his headache, and asks Petrov how he will ensure that monthly 1,000 worth of goods and materials, and what kind of steps he would take to make sure of the revenue target. Roland slaps the ransom terms in front of the redhead, signaling Knight Carter to escort him out. With a cunning smile, he shakes goodbye to that poor guy, and tells him he'll be waiting for his answer if he genuinely wants to manage the place considering all the conditions. He also reminds him not to forget about the hefty ransom for his father. Well, Nightingale sure caught him off guard with her sudden appearance. She pointed out how the ambassador seemed pretty sincere and truthful. Prince Roland, feeling a bit embarrassed and blushing, quickly looked away as she leaned in closer. He agreed with her, admitting he used to think nobles were just lazy pleasure seekers, but he's impressed by the Honeysuckle family's business skills. As Nightingale leaned even closer, holding him in her grasp, she whispered softly, her warm breath tickling his ear, asking if he really didn't want to stick around in Longsong Fortress. But before he could answer, she darted off and reappeared before him, reminding him to consider Longsong's wealth and how prosperous this place is compared to Border Town. Roland shakes his head in response, explaining that Longsong is deep in political roots, which makes it tough to revolutionize here. So he'd rather stick with his Border Town and play Anno 1800 and keep on expanding. Not to mention, the influence of the church here runs deep, and discrimination against witches would be at its peak. He's always maintained that he wants all witches to roam freely on the streets, something he can only achieve in Border Town. The girl admires his noble ideals, her heart racing as she struggles to control her impulses. Suddenly, she loses control, grabbing our hero and pulling him close until they're both blushing and they share a kiss. After that slimy and slippery smooch, she quickly steps back, leaving the prince feeling utterly embarrassed. She suddenly disappears as Knight Carter appears, announcing that High Priest Tylo of the Longsong Fortress Church wishes to meet him. Prince Roland, still blushing from the earlier encounter, gives Knight Carter the go-ahead to allow the priest in. Shortly after, Inquisitor Tylo arrives in the office and promptly greets their new ruler. He explains that he's here to pay his respects on behalf of the Holy City. As they settle in, Prince Roland is surprised that the church does not seem bothered by the death of Duke Ryan and by the new ruler of the Longsong. The priest shrugs it off, saying the church usually stays out of political squabbles as long as the king governs justly and improves the lives of his people. He adds, with a knowing look, that they don't care where the king came from either. With his usual sass, Roland asks if Tylo's only here to give blessings. The priest smirks and says that's just part of it, and he's got a proposition that might pique Roland's interest. The priest tells Roland he's willing to assist in expanding his territory. Roland, though, reminds him of the church's stance on staying out of political clashes and secular disputes. The priest clarifies that while they usually keep their distance, they can't ignore everything. He explains that the conflict between Timothy and Princess Garcia has stirred up the southern region, and the church wants to back a king with strong moral values to bring peace back swiftly. He acknowledges that Roland's actions have made positive waves across the western region, and everyone is aware of it. Oh, the church will be rooting for our hero to progress forward. But since they don't want to get deep into political stuff, the priest offers to help the prince by providing material aid. He then rummages through his coat and throws a box, stating that this is a special medicine produced by the Holy City. He tells our hero to accept this as a goodwill gesture from the church. The boy picks up the pill curiously and examines it closely. The priest explains that the red pill grants temporary incredible strength, while the black pill enhances pain tolerance and resistance to extreme temperatures. After the priest leaves, Roland reflects on the church's approach to cozying up to him and giving their support. He turns to Nightingale and asks if she can discern if the priest was truthful or not, but she explains she couldn't penetrate his thoughts as there was black void due to the divine stone of judgment he carried. Upon inspecting the pills with her fog ability, she notes they seem surrounded by a black void, similar to the divine stone of judgment, but it doesn't appear to affect her abilities like the stone does. She figures they could test those pills on some poor soul already on death row to check their effectiveness. Meanwhile, our hero is confused why the church wants him to fight his siblings to seize the crown, especially after Garcia's victory in the Battle of Eagle City. He is certain that battling his siblings for the crown will only drain Grey Castle dry, and wonders whether the church aims to instill fear in the populace to strengthen its influence. He blows off all that politics and decides to clean up Longsong Fortress. By using its loot, he plans to beef up Border Town with machinery and other stuff. 3 days later, we're back in the Borderlands, and Night Carter's wondering if handing Longsong Fortress over to the Honeysuckle family is a smart move. Prince Roland is all confidence, saying they won't dare break the contract. Even if they did, he will gladly take down Longsong once again. Besides, he trusts their business-doing skills, and he is hoping that they will give him surprising results. Then, the lady spots folks in the distance, and Roland confirms they're the first batch of serfs sent from Longsong. He explains their generational bondage to the land, enduring harsh lives under the whip and control of their masters. This grim reality saddens the lady, but Roland assures her they'll provide for their basic needs and work towards freeing them. He pledges to eradicate slavery entirely in the years to come, offering hope to these oppressed people. As their boat nears the shore, the prince catches a funky smell from the seaside, causing his face to go pale as he realizes it's the unmistakable odor of literal shit. He immediately starts vomiting rainbows, hands trembling, and tells Carter that today he's going to make the most impactful decision in the history of Border Town. "Yes, that's right," he declares emphatically. "We absolutely need toilets on every corner of Border Town immediately." The others present are startled by this revelation as the prince explains that the first toilet will be placed near the serfs' wooden sheds. He insists on enforcing a law that requires people to use the sheds for shitting, and he wants the area opposite the Redwater River to be designated as an industrial zone, free from any unpleasant odors. The knight, not really familiar with the whole toilet thing, wonders aloud why they need a special spot just for taking a dump. He figures people can enjoy nature while they take a dump outside. Besides, people are really used to working in funky smells and all. The prince gets where he's coming from, remembering how he used to shrug off hygiene too. But now he's all about setting up toilets and teaching folks to stay clean to avoid getting sick. Then the old man chimes in, asking what they're going to do with all that collected poop. The prince says they'll stash it for farming as fertilizer. The old advisor and Night Carter are completely creeped out. The mere thought of spreading human waste in their fields and then eating food grown with that fertilizer is making them gag uncontrollably. As they puke rainbows, the prince explains that these feces can be used as fertilizer for farming, especially with Sister Leaf's improved wheat seeds, which will exponentially boost yield and growth rates. While he's saying this, Lady Leaf can't help but notice loud noises coming from the prince's room, telling those dorks to puke outside. Later that night, our hero falls asleep while Nightingale appears to tuck him in with blankets. She feels a warmth in her eyes every time she sees him. She disappears immediately and gets back into her own room. Wendy catches on quickly, noting that Nightingale just came out of Roland's room. The girl blushes after getting caught red-handed, asking her friend why she's still awake. In response, Wendy reminds her that the prince isn't a child, so sneaking around like that in the dead of night isn't the best move. The love-struck lady then mentions that news of the witch union's dissolution has already spread throughout the kingdom, so she's worried that some witches might try to harm the prince because of it. Wendy reassures her, saying the castle is fully guarded. Plus, the prince keeps a divine stone of judgment right under his pillow. As Nightingale undresses, her friend reminds her they're witches and can't have children. Blushing, Nightingale acknowledges this, but recalls the prince once said he wouldn't mind marrying a witch, and she believes he meant it. After freshening up, Nightingale flops back onto her bed and probs Wendy to spill something about the church. Her friend asks why she's suddenly interested in the church, and Nightingale reveals about the highly paid priest who visited our prince. The priest promised to support Roland to claim the throne, even though the prince wasn't keen on cooperating. That priest still offered them 2 suspicious pills, supposedly blessed by the Holy City's prayer room. Nightingale asks her if she knows anything about these shady pills from her time at the Abbey. Wendy explains she doesn't know much, since the Abbey had high walls on all sides and she could only see the sky. Many young girls like her, who didn't know where they came from, lived there. There were also orphans and abandoned children taken in by the church, some even sold by their parents. She learned etiquette, singing, and reading there. But once she became an adult, she was sent away from the Abbey. As she recalls her past, Wendy feels a chill run down her spine. Nightingale immediately hugs her to offer comfort and warmth, and Wendy embraces her friend in return. So, she goes on to explain that she spent about 10 years there until that fateful day arrived. Wendy's teacher forcefully dragged her to a prison cell that day, where she was abruptly thrown into a dimly lit room. The stern woman who tossed her inside warned Wendy not to ask questions and just endure it. With those curt words, she slammed the door shut, leaving poor Wendy alone in the darkness. As Wendy looked around, a chilling sense of dread washed over her. There were priests with whips in hand, already mercilessly beating another girl. When they turned their attention to Wendy, a terrifying chill ran down her spine. These filthy, vile individuals seemed pleased to have another victim. Once the other girl lost consciousness from their torture, they turned their attention to Wendy. They approached her like demons, their eyes gleaming with sick intentions. To them, she was just another choir girl with a developed body, ripe for their cruel desires. They lunge at her, grabbing her by her long hair, tears streaming involuntarily down her face. The brute slams her against the gate, covering her mouth with his hand, warning her not to make a scene or scream because it'll all be over soon. As this filthy dude slips his hand under her skirt, Wendy's soul shatters, her eyes going numb. As the vile man enjoys himself, a sudden punch lands squarely on his face, snapping his neck and sending him crashing to the ground, blood pooling around him. The one who delivered the knockout blow is none other than the same girl who had endured their torture for too long. After seeing her released from her shackles, the other guy lunges at her, but with a single punch, she puts a hole in his gut. Then, with her bare hands, she takes down the other one too. Wendy is totally freaked out by all this madness. One of the men pulls out his stone of divine judgment, wondering if she's awakened her powers. The woman raises her ridiculously long, stretchy leg and brings it crashing down on the man's head, scrambling his brains completely. Once all the priests are down, Wendy still trembles in fear, while the other girl calmly walks towards the gate, standing defiantly as knights rush into the room. The sight of the dead men left the arriving woman utterly shocked. She collapses to the ground in terror, and one of the knights swings his sword, but the girl dodges every attack effortlessly. The knight keeps coming at her, but the girl grabs his hand and twists it so hard she tears it off from his body. The other soldier by the gate freezes in shock. Without missing a beat, she jumps up and tears him apart before anyone can blink. Word spreads like wildfire that there's a demon in the cell, and this girl takes on every knight like it's nothing, while Wendy just watches in horror. She's ruthless, stabbing the knight in the back with her spear without showing any emotions over her face. More soldiers swarm in, trying to surround her, but as they charge, she gets serious, swinging her sword so fast it's a blur, cutting through them like they're nothing more than cucumbers. Meanwhile, the terrified Wendy crawls toward her teacher's body, grabbing the key she needs. And with that, the flashback ends. Wendy explains that thanks to that girl, she managed to escape from the abbey. Using a few silver royals she took from the dead, she wandered until she arrived in the Seawind region. 2 years later, she awakened and became a witch, bringing her story to an end. She later heard that the church covered up the incident, claiming it was a fire. She doesn't know what became of that girl or the other girls abandoned at the abbey. Nightingale felt deeply saddened by Wendy's story, as she could relate to her pain. She grabbed her friend's hand, offering the warmth and love she needed. In the next scene, we've got Baldy turning all red, like radiating this intense crimson aura. Our best knight Carter is duking it out with him, and he appears to be seriously struggling. Looks like Prince gave this bald dude that power-boosting pill to see if this pill is actually a real deal or it's just hot air. Judging by how our knight's having a tough time, that pill's definitely packing a punch. Anna is excited to see this inmate holding his own against Carter, who is one of the strongest knights around. Prince Roland is also impressed, realizing the priest wasn't lying after all. He can only imagine what kind of combat power a trained knight would have if they took the same power-boosting pill. This seemingly random guy is giving Carter a tough fight, despite not being a knight or soldier. As the fight goes on, our knight finally lands a critical hit, making the red guy spit blood. However, he quickly recovers and charges back at Carter, who retaliates and disarms him with a single blow. The knight acknowledges the man's skill and calls for another sword. But just then, the furious man spots people watching from above the wall. When he locks eyes with the prince, his rage intensifies, and he immediately turns towards him. Seeing this threat to the prince's life, the knight orders the soldier to shoot down the prisoner immediately, and the gunman quickly opens fire, pumping bullets into his back. However, the guy doesn't seem to be affected by the bullets, so Carter quickly commands his soldier to bring him his horse. But it's too late. The prisoner takes a stance and effortlessly leaps over 30 feet into the air. Just as he's about to strike our hero, Anna jumps in and uses her fiery powers to start roasting him alive. When that isn't enough, Nightingale joins in, quickly slashing him with her sword to immobilize him. That crazy guy caused quite a scene, but luckily Nana was there to patch up the injured quickly, and no one got seriously hurt. As for the prisoner who took the pill, despite gaining incredible strength, it seemed to have some serious side effects. According to Nightingale, the symptoms on his body were similar to someone who had swallowed a divine stone of judgment. Even with these side effects, if the church has this medicine, it's not hard to imagine them becoming a major power someday. No wonder Anna's fire magic didn't do much against that guy, especially if there are remnants of the divine stone of judgment in that pill. This is all just speculation from my end, since these shitty translations don't explain things clearly. Anyway, the prince learned today that the church's willingness to sell these kinds of things suggests they aren't afraid of retaliation from the new king after Grey Castle reunifies. This only means that they have something even stronger than these pills, which is why they don't care if someone uses these pills against the church. This year, the prince initially planned to focus on education, agriculture, and production. But now weapon research and development are becoming top priorities. He's planning to produce breech-loader firearms because they're easier to make. As for the cartridges, all he knows is they involve something called mercury fulminate. He'll likely need a lot of money for research, gathering alchemists, and setting up laboratories. While the prince is lost in thought, the girls snap him out of his daydreaming, reminding him that it's getting late and time to hit the hay, and they'll continue their work tomorrow. Nightingale has already dozed off, probably tired from all those shitty algebra lectures. Everyone smiles to see her peacefully asleep, looking more vulnerable than they've ever seen her before. The prince grabs some blankets and gently covers her. He's glad to see her resting so peacefully, considering how attentive and worked up she usually is. A little relaxation wouldn't hurt anyone. Meanwhile, Anna uses her magic powers to prepare some hot water in her room. Once it reaches the perfect temperature, she strips off her clothes and slips into the bath, enjoying a relaxing soak. She couldn't help but admire our hero. While normal people typically only bathe once a month, the prince ensures everyone bathes daily with fresh water. She's glad her prince is different from what she's read in stories. She remembers how he explained that everything in the universe is made of countless little balls, and to see these balls, you have to zoom in millions of times. Heat and cold are just how active these balls are. If they're moving a lot, things are hot. If they're not moving much, things seem cold. It seems we're talking about atoms here. Anna gets curious and wants to peek inside her own green fire to see these balls. She concentrates intensely and starts drifting somewhere in space. Green energy swirls around her, and I literally have no clue what the hell is happening here. When she finally returns to reality, she sees that her magic has turned red. But I'm still not sure what's going on. The next morning rolls around, and Roland is deep in a dream about battles with tanks and aircraft. In his dream, he's conquering the world with mechas and cutting-edge military power. Suddenly, Nightingale's voice interrupts his vivid dream, and he wakes up groggily. His first question upon opening his eyes is whether there's a new witch in town. Nightingale replies no, and reminds him that Anna's abilities have changed once again. This news really confuses the sleepy prince because Anna has already reached adulthood. He gets snapped awake when a wet towel slaps his face, and Nightingale urges him to quickly go see Anna to check out her latest transformation. She describes it as a shocking magical form, almost tangible. Shortly after, they begin walking down to the office. On their way, Nightingale reveals that when she found Anna in her room, she was sitting at her desk surrounded by metal objects. At that point, she was so shocked that her bread fell from her hand when she saw Anna's magic powers had changed internally, and there was a cube inside her. The prince is confused by the mention of a cube and asks what it is. Nightingale explains that when a witch awakens, her magic initially appears as a thin mist. Over time, it transforms into a swirling gas of various colors. Wendy's is white, Lady Leaf's is green. Anna always had a lot of magic, which only increased after reaching adulthood, and her color was dark green. But now, her magic has taken the form of a fist-sized cube that is completely opaque, like solid matter. Once they all gather in the office, Anna immediately turns to the prince, and without skipping a beat, he asks her what's going on. Anna spills that last night. She was thinking about what they learned in class about the whole universe being made up of tiny balls. She imagined her green flames as made of these little balls, and then she started tinkering with the chains holding them together. She reshaped and reconnected them, completely transforming the flames into something like black silk. Now she can control it with her mind, using it to slice through iron ingots. Using her math skills, she even cut a perfect square. She's practically begging for a pat on the head for her new achievement. The prince then tells her to show off her new abilities in person. Right on cue, she summons her dark powers. When our hero asks if she can change its shape, she snaps her fingers, and poof, it turns into a cube, leaving everyone amazed. She then pulls back her powers and shapes them into strings. The boy tries touching them, and, to his surprise, they're tangible. He asks if she can make them thinner. She nods, saying she can, but warns they're sharp enough to cut anyone who touches them. Despite looking delicate and thin, these strings are actually pretty tough. Unlike her green flames, she can control the temperature of different parts of the flame. Well, our hero seems to have figured out that his hunch was spot on. Magic is just another form of energy, and it's all about how a witch channels and controls that energy. The possibilities are endless, depending on how well they can wield it and what they can imagine. For instance, imagine trying to describe an airplane to someone who has never seen one. It's tough. So, the only limits to magic are what a witch knows and how big they can imagine. The more they understand about the world, the stronger their magic can become. Anna figured out that everything's made up of tiny particles, and that insight helped her grasp how her flames work and how these particles fit together. So she is now able to reshape those particles to make different things. And finally, our hero gives her a deserving pat on the head for a job well done. He then declares firmly that he has made up his mind. Everyone in the Witch Union will be attending study classes. Everyone is startled to hear this, and the prince appoints Scroll as everyone's teacher of enlightenment. She raises doubts about whether she can handle the role, while Nightingale, not much of a studious type, tries to slip away quietly. But my man gives her a deadly stare that stops her in her tracks. Sister Moon also expresses concerns about her ability to perform in this new role. Our hero assures her that knowledge can boost her abilities and open up new opportunities. He confidently announces they'll hit the books after dinner every Monday to Friday, starting with the ABCs of reading and writing because, as he puts it, learning can totally shape your future. But it seems Nightingale is still not too thrilled about it. In the next scene, we see Prince Roland informing a knight that he's going to start a poultry farm with chickens and ducks. He assigns some land on the west border for the farm and tells the knight to also teach others how to raise livestock. He warns that if the farm doesn't take off, he will be sent to the slope mines for labor. Once the current guy leaves, the prince calls in the next person. That is when Nightingale pipes up, questioning why the knights are being put on livestock duty since they are supposed to pick some people with basic education to become teachers. The prince explains that all the knights have ordinary hobbies, and since there's a demand for those skills, he decided to let them pursue what they're best at. The lady calls up the next knight, and he steps forward right away. This one looks pretty educated and polished. Introducing himself as Ferlin Eltek, he's really glad about our hero taking the charge of Longsong Fortress. He thanks the prince and offers to help out, saying to send word if he's needed. My guy is totally freaked out seeing this dude show such loyalty, especially since he is a knight of Duke Ryan. That's when Ferlin Eltek gets serious, dropping the bomb that he used to be Duke Ryan's top knight and swore loyalty only to him. But he abused his power, committed countless wrongs in the Western Territories, and even took his wife by force. So he's been waiting for a chance to bring him down. So, even though he was not able to kill that bastard personally, he is now glad that someone else did. Our hero then asks the man if he is literate and can read and write. The knight says yes, and without wasting a moment, Roland decides to make this guy the teacher. And not only he will get a house for this job, he is also going to a fat paycheck. Ferlin Eltek asks if that means all the illiterate folks will end up in the mines, to which our hero nods. The knight then voices concern about people over 50 not being fit for mine work. He states that there is a knight named Halon, and he is also over 50. My guy clarifies that he doesn't see anyone as a slave, and besides, the mines have steam engines to help out, plus workers get holidays off. Ferlin Eltek suddenly stands up, making Nightingale jump a bit, but all he reveals is that his family has a treasure map passed down for generations. The treasure it points to is in the misty forest northwest of here, and our prince appears to be the only one who can visit that spot in today's Western Territories. He reveals that his father never let him touch the map, but he managed to sneak a look and grab it because he's determined to find those treasures. The pictures on the map have endured many years without fading, clearly not drawn by anything ordinary. Once he had the map, he quietly left the territory to begin his treasure hunt, but his plans were interrupted when he became Duke's knight. He pleads with our hero to consider the map and release the old knight Halon. Nightingale reassures our hero that this man is speaking truthfully, prompting Prince Roland to agree to consider the request and ask to see the map. When the prince checks out the map, he's totally blown away to see it points to a place called Tequila. Miss Scroll remarks that if the map's depiction is accurate, it's an incredible coincidence because the symbols on the map match locations recorded in ancient books. This suggests the church once constructed a city deep in the plains to defend against demons. However, it's unclear why the church decided to erase this part of their history. If Tequila also contains underground ruins like those found in the eastern forest, they might uncover clues like why the church hides demons' existence, their old fights against them, and why they go after witches like their demon spawn. Nightingale decides to head to the knight's house to investigate further, hoping to find more clues. However, our hero warns her it might not be a good idea. If a family guards a treasure map, their home likely holds divine stones of judgment. Since they can't reach Tequila at the moment, he suggests saving this adventure for the future. The hexagram's location is about 50 kilometers away, reachable in a day by Sister Lightning. So, he decides to send her to scout the area first. For now, he shifts focus to the North Slope mines, putting the treasure map aside for later. Before heading to the North Slope mines, he instructs Lady Scroll to teach everyone the phonetic alphabet this evening. If they need more teaching materials, she can ask Soraya, who's turned into quite the printing machine. Then he rummages through a drawer meant for a gift for Lady Scroll. At first he opens the wrong drawer, which contains the snacks tucked away by Nightingale, which totally embarrasses her for some reason. But he soon retrieves a box from another drawer and presents it to Sister Scroll, telling her it's for her. She opens it eagerly to find a beautiful pair of glasses inside. Nightingale interjects, pointing out that Lady Scroll already has perfect eyesight, questioning the need for glasses. To this, our hero enthusiastically explains that he simply adores girls in glasses. Given her role as a teacher, the glasses would make her look more intellectual and beautiful simultaneously. And seeing him all hyped up about the glasses, Nightingale couldn't help but find his fetish rather creepy. Finally, when our studious girl puts on those glasses, my audience goes nuts over how great she looks. Yeah, I'm talking about you. You might want to hit pause if you're a fan of sophisticated style. Moving on, we find ourselves up at North Slope, where the prince is totally surprised by this super long steel tube. He's really impressed by how perfectly it's made, down to the thickness and everything. Anna grins at the praise, while our hero's pretty impressed by her new skill of cutting stuff precisely with her magic threads. With Anna pitching in, the town's industrial game is set to level up big time, and he's even thinking they could start making top-notch underwear for the witches soon enough. But then, Nightingale mentions that even though Anna's powers have improved significantly, her magic thread spans only 10 steps. At the same time, Anna is sure it's actually 15, which leaves our hero scratching his head in confusion. After sizing up their leg lengths, he figures out they count steps differently, probably due to their heights. It's frustrating because measurement units are a complete mess in this world, relying more on approximate values than any real standard. Finally fed up, he decides it's high time to establish clear, unified measurements from scratch, and he assigns Anna to the task. Next up, we're at Clearwater Port, where the Knight of Garcia looks pretty smug about their thriving port. He's convinced the Queen of Clearwater is unstoppable and destined to rule Grey Castle after dealing with Timothy again. But he's puzzled by his mistress's recent worry and anxiety. Suddenly, a man arrives, reporting that the chiefs of Sandstone and Blackbone clans wish to see her. The knight tells him to bring them in, but these guys show up uninvited anyway. The big man greets the lady with some weird, tacky lines, and the other lady also greets in the same way. This big guy is Chief Blackbone, known as Blackbone, while the lady is Chief Kabbalah of the Sandstone clan. As soon as they arrive, both express concern that their warriors have been struggling with weakness and depression since the last battle, only improving with regular doses of new pills. They're here to request more, and Blackbone echoes the same worry. But Garcia dances around their request, saying the whole production thing is a mess right now. She doesn't have much on hand, and they'll just have to wait for the next batch. The chiefs ask how long they'll have to wait. She cryptically replies that since everything about the pills is secretive, she tells them to return for now and wait patiently. Her knight quickly urges them to leave once Garcia makes it clear she expects payment in gold royals or even river water. The cocky knight fumes with anger, dismissing these people as insignificant bugs always begging for favors. Meanwhile, Garcia looks visibly troubled. Noticing her distress, Blondie asks if she's worried about the pill problem. Garcia denies it and reveals that she has already figured that out. She's planning to threaten the church. She'll demand they send the pills right away, or she'll hang the heads of priests from Clearwater Port on the Black Sails flagship. She then hands over a letter, which is the real source of her anxiety all along. As the knight reads it, she explains it's from a spy in Hermes. The letter spills the beans that the church has taken over the kingdom's capital, accusing Queen Lina of Everwinter of hiding her identity as a witch for years. This news really rattles the knight, and that is when Garcia declares she's fed up with Clearwater Port's view and decides to take this rare chance to travel somewhere new for a change of scenery. Her knight quickly catches on that she's looking to use the chaos in Everwinter to her advantage. She confirms it, mentioning that her idiot brother Timothy is too wrapped up trying to reunify the East to bother with her. And as for Roland, he's a goofball who surprisingly took down Longsong Fortress, but returned back to the border town afterward. And she is sure that he must be terrified of his sister, because she is the one who used to bully him until he wet his pants. The knight is pretty happy that there's no one left to stand in her way. Looks like her path to becoming queen is wide open. The scene then shifts to the Holy City, where we see the big-shot priests gathered in their council chamber. They're grilling Archbishop Tayfun about the law and order situation in Everwinter. The old man reports that apart from a few stubborn nobles in the Everwinter, most folks are actually welcoming the church's takeover. He vows that those nobles who won't repent will be dealt with one by one. The lady then decides to just kill these mindless pleasure-seeker nobles. That's when another bishop chimes in, saying they should wait for things to settle down in the kingdom before getting rid of the nobles. That way the church won't feel any resistance by the people. Currently, he plans to offer them positions equal to their current titles under the law of the church, though those titles wouldn't pass to future generations. He reminds everyone they're aiming to abolish kingship eventually, so there's no rush. Heather, feeling a bit let down, reluctantly agrees to wait for another day to kill those filthy nobles. Looks like her sassy remarks definitely rattle Tayfun's nerves. Moving on, Priest Maine asks his friend Tayfun about the situation in the castle. In response, the old man reports that according to the latest info, the new King Timothy didn't return to the King's City after his defeat, but headed straight for the eastern region. In the war, he took Duke Francis with him to take on Queen Garcia of Clearwater, but ended up tasting defeat himself, with Duke also meeting his end. So Timothy quickly moved to divide up the Duke's territory in the eastern region. Priest Main finds this news rather satisfying and instructs his crew to keep the pill supply flowing, balancing Garcia and Timothy's strength. He predicts that in just 2 years, there won't be a soldier left standing in the entire kingdom of Greycastle. Seems like they're intentionally pulling strings to set them up to fight for the throne. They've even sent those crummy pills to Garcia Wimbledon to weaken both sides. Not to mention, those pills are addictive and draining the life out of the people using them. Taefun then reveals about our hero. He reports that he refused to touch those pills or accept help from the church. Plus, he's not interested in fighting for the throne and has gone back to the border town after conquering Longsong. Like everyone else, Maine is baffled about how our goofball hero managed to take down Longsong Fortress. Lady Heather chimes in, suggesting they might be underestimating Prince Roland's strength. Maine admits that he is amazed to see that Roland took down Longsong Fortress, and it just shows he's got some muscle to flex. But he's sure that no matter how talented someone is, without the resources to back them up, they won't last. Since he chose to retreat to the cushy border town, it's clear he's given up on messing with Greycastle. So now, he's no threat to the church's grand plans. The lady agrees, saying it's all true on paper. She lifts her gown and pulls out a piece of paper hidden in her sash, along with that sneaky knife. She hands it over to Maine and assures him the info is 100% legit. Once he reads it, he finds out that Prince Roland has witches on his side. Back at the border town, the advisor is visiting our hero, totally freaking out about why he's charging only 20% of the serfs' crops as property tax when they become free people. He admits that even 50% would still be seen as generous. The prince reassures him, saying having a basement full of gold means nothing. He smartly explains that by only charging 20%, he plans to buy the rest of the crops at a fixed price. That way, once they have money, they'll spend it on good stuff. And Prince Roland will be the one providing that good stuff. It's a win-win where money flows back to him, and the people will also be able to raise their living standards. Suddenly, Knight Carter bursts in, excitedly reporting that Sean is back with crop seeds from Clearwater Port. The man in question is grinning like he hit the jackpot as he shows off all the plants the prince asked for. First, there's this corn that he's calling Pearl Rice, which has everyone doing a double take. My guy's practically drooling over it already. Then, he pulls out some potatoes, and our hero jumps at them like he's about to whip up some killer French fries. Hearing this, Sean curiously asks what these French fries are. Prince spins a story about munching them at some fancy feast where the chef called them fries. Next up, sugarcane arrives, and our hero's thrilled, predicting a sweet future. But poor Knight Carter can't seem to find them sweet even after taking a bite. Meanwhile, the old man's freaking out, shaking like a leaf. He was just a tad suspicious about Prince Roland maybe being possessed by demons. But now he's dead certain after seeing this kind of genius. He is sure that Roland's personality has changed, and his behavior seems weird. He's heard of stuff he never knew existed and has knowledge no one else has heard of. But despite all this, he can't find anything bad in what the prince has done so far. So, he decides to just brush those thoughts off because as long as Roland keeps doing good stuff, even if he's a bit of a devil, it's all good. Roland hands over the sugarcane to the old man, who quickly sinks his teeth to taste its sweetness. By the end of the day, Roland's feeling pretty beat, thinking over Sean's report, and he has found out that her sister Garcia also has the church's pills. Now, he understands why the church is trying to help him and Garcia with their pills. They want to provoke conflict. In light of this, he plans to prepare high-rate-of-fire weapons to counter the looming threats. Suddenly, Anna appears, catching him completely off guard, leaving him startled. The prince jokes about Nightingale always popping up out of the blue, and Anna has also started doing the same, teasing her that she might give him a heart attack someday. He then asks why she's here instead of in class. She explains she's stuck on a tough physics problem, and Teacher Scroll sent her to him for some personal help. After seeing the problem, he admits he's no quantum mechanics expert either. He still tries to teach her, diving into stuff like different dimensions. As they hang out, night creeps in, and they finish up their studies. When it's time to say goodbye, they share these intense glances that leave them both blushing. They quickly look away, feeling all awkward. The prince feels too bashful to make a move, but Anna takes the lead, getting closer herself. He finally gathers his nerve and gently places his hand under her right ear. Once they relax, they move in and share a kiss. Another day rolls around at Border Town. Nightingale glances around, spotting slogans plastered everywhere, which are encouraging people to work hard. Curious, she asks why these slogans are everywhere. The prince explains they're meant to inspire people to build their wealth through hard work. He believes these words will eventually become reality and deeply resonate with everyone. Meanwhile, we see Anna making some stuff which might belong to a chemistry lab. She wonders aloud why they are melting and reshaping these perfectly good glass cups. In response, he reveals to these curious ladies that they're for the alchemists who will visit Border Town in the future. Nightingale grabs a funnel, pretends it's a wine glass, and raises an imaginary toast while peering at it with her curious eyes. The prince explains he's too busy to figure out how to turn sand into clear glass, so he's using already available glass for now. This leaves the girl even more confused. She's wondering how sand and glass are connected. The prince responds that they need to refine the sand to get perfectly clear glass. Otherwise, it tends to come out brown or green. The chemistry equipment has to be pure and colorless. Meanwhile, Nightingale keeps messing around with the equipment and gets a playful bonk on the head. And our hero continues to teach Anna about how he plans to use the equipment to handle acids and conduct more experiments. After the playful bonk, Nightingale walks away while the prince continues teaching Anna. Nightingale spots some delicious snacks on the table and can't resist. Being a bit of a snacker herself, she grabs a steamed bun and takes a big bite. The flavor instantly transports her to heaven. When she opens her eyes, it's like she's wandering through a ripe wheat field, enjoying every bite with its weedy smell and amazing texture. The filling inside is bursting with goodness, and the aftertaste just keeps going. Roland notices the lady enjoying the snack all by herself, and happily tells her it's a steamed bun he had the chef make specifically. He then decides to wash up their dirty hands and have afternoon tea to enjoy these delicious treats together, and the both ladies eagerly look forward to it. As the day wears on, the blazing sun makes it hard for Nightingale to keep her eyes open. Meanwhile, Prince Roland is goofing around with Anna, and there's a faint smile on Nightingale's face. Her eyes slowly close as she drifts into sleep, her thoughts filled with dreams of marrying our prince. In her dream, she walks down the aisle of a grand church hall, lined with other witches. When they reach the altar, the prince lifts the veil from her face, revealing her true beauty, and they share a kiss. While she's lost in this dream, Anna playfully tells Prince Roland to quiet down because she's sure her older sister must be having a lovely dream. It's the only thing that could explain the smile on her face. Next up, we're back in the Holy City where we find the three archbishops once again. They're deep in discussion about wiping out the witches our hero is keeping in the border town. However, since the church is already gearing up to attack Wolfheart, they're short on soldiers. Archbishop Maine assigns Priestess Mira to lead a small but elite unit called the Judgment Army. He's confident she'll get better results if she heads to the border town with them. The priestess agrees wholeheartedly, and she is ready to cleanse the border town of all evil. With his blessings, she's instructed to head to the border town right away to scout, and she nods without hesitation. Lady Heather then teases Maine about giving Priestess Mira so much attention, joking whether he's grooming her to be the next big shot of the church or if he just has a soft spot for her. Hearing this, Priest Taifun, who is not really a fan of her sassy and careless tone, angrily reminds her that this situation involves both kingship and witches, and they can't afford to ignore it as it could affect the church's future plans. Maine agrees, speculating that the fourth prince might be harboring witches. He's convinced that the goofball prince must have been enchanted by their beauty, and now he is their puppet under their charm spell. Also, there are rumors that the border town is recruiting more witches, and Maine sees it as a direct challenge to the church's authority. He wants it all sorted before things spiral, even considering going to the border town himself if Mira fails in her task. The scene cuts to some rundown spot where these witches snagged some poor dude. They give him a splash of water to wake him up, and when he opens his eyes, he's totally freaked out seeing these ladies around him. His mind suddenly flashes back, remembering how he got caught by these ladies, and he's dead certain that they are witches. The girl immediately points her shiny dagger at his face. And after seeing his scared expression, one of them then asks him why he is wetting his pants now, since he was the one chasing witches all this time. Then, a flashback shows our hero assigning this guy Theo a mission. He was basically instructed to use underground channels and spread gossip that the border town is recruiting witches. The prince told him that if he got caught by witches, he should claim he's from the Cooperation Association. When Theo drops this bombshell over these witches, they look surprised. But then another woman storms in, wielding a giant sword like a female version of Guts. She laughs off his claim as nonsense, saying the Cooperation Association is way out in the Seawind region. The other girls are thrilled to see her back and they quickly surround her, revealing that this guy was the one using the underground channels to spread rumors about recruitment. The boy quickly defends himself, saying he's just spilling the truth. He insists the Cooperation has found the Holy Mountain and all the witches have settled in the border town. They're not possessed by demons and don't feel any pain from anti-phase stuff either. He goes on to reveal their mentor named Kara, who can summon magical snakes, something he's witnessed firsthand and found incredible. He also mentions Wendy and Scroll, who sent him on this mission. This girl is totally intrigued to hear all this, while Theo further talks about Nightingale and others. In response, the women point out that if they've really settled on the Holy Mountain in the border town, they shouldn't have spread the news. It'll only alert the church, and if they don't clear out of there soon, they're in big trouble. The redhead witch asks what their next move should be, to which the black-haired one declares that their leader will arrive tonight at midnight, along with other witches, so they will be sailing the ship along with others. As for Theo, she kicks his chair over, sending him crashing to the ground still tied up. The black-haired woman then tells her redhead friend to hop on the ship with the others while she heads back to the border town with Theo. She wants to confirm if the Witch Association actually found the Holy Mountains. So she tells her friend to inform their leader Tilly that she is going to the border town. In the next scene, we see Lady Lightning soaring through the sky, exploring the areas marked on the same treasure map our hero received from that night. She's covered a lot of ground already, and the prince specifically asked her to scope out the notorious Misty Forest, and after proudly taking on the task, she's psyched to explore further solo. Just as heavy rain starts dumping, she quickly tucks the map into her jacket, making sure it stays bone dry no matter what. Then bam! She spots something nearby and takes off like a shot, racing through the forest like lightning. Deep in the woods, she stumbles upon ancient ruins and starts scanning the place for anything fishy. She admits she had no clue a place like this existed because it was completely hidden from view by the mist when she was up in the air. If not for the rain, she likely would have missed it altogether. Her nose catches a tantalizing scent, the aroma of adventure that perks up her spirits. After a bit of poking around, she realizes these must be the ruins marked on the treasure map. According to the plan, she's supposed to note down the location and head straight back to the border town to report everything to the prince. But her adventurous spirit kicks in, urging her to venture inside alone. Besides, with the rain pouring down, why not explore until it stops? Once inside, she finds empty halls, so she continues deeper, but she still finds nothing. But as she is walking forward, she hears a faint voice, calling for help. Lightning gets absolutely terrified and immediately hides behind the wall, while the same voice continues to call for help. She finds it hard to believe that anyone could be here, considering these ruins are centuries old and deep within the misty forest. It doesn't make sense for someone to be lurking around, but despite her doubts, she pushes forward, thinking maybe there's an explorer stuck inside who needs help. She cautiously pushes the door gently, but the door crashes down and before her stands a disgusting monster, a creature straight out of nightmares. This terrifying scene freezes her in place, and she falls to the ground as she realizes that this is the same demon which the Lady Leaf fought in the Badlands. Tears well up involuntarily as pure horror grips her heart. The monster towers over her menacingly, ready to pounce. The next thing that fills the air is her piercing scream, blending with the thunderous roar of the storm outside. The next scene takes us back to the border town, where our hero meets Margaret Farman, a lively merchant from King City. She's brimming with enthusiasm, bombarding him with questions about his steam engines. She's eager to buy a lot of these machines, offering a hefty sum of 500 gold royals for each. My guy's thrilled at the prospect of earning 5,000 gold royals for 10 steam engines. But as much as he wants to sell them, he can't just hand them over to the royals. These steam engines are the result of Anna and her hard work, something that can't be bought or sold. He's torn because Margaret is not only wealthy but also strikingly attractive. With a necklace adorned with pure gold containing the divine stone of judgment, even Nightingale can't detect if she is lying or not. He also notices Margaret's enthusiastic personality, which is a 100% clone of Lady Lightning itself. Anyway, the prince tells her besides saltpeter, he needs iron, copper, and ferrous sulfate, hoping she can arrange those materials if they plan for a long-term deal. In response, the woman happily agrees. But suddenly she is shocked by something she sees, and when our guy turns to look, he spots lightning flashing across the window. He quickly opens it, and she immediately hugs him tight, tears streaming down her face. The prince signals his knight to fetch Nana immediately. Roland then gets shocked when he remembers that there is a merchant inside the office, which is troubling him because Lightning is a witch. On the flip side, this lady seems to already know Lady Lightning, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's her mother. But our hero doesn't pay attention to her and decides to take Lightning for treatment, leaving the morning lady screaming behind as she watches Lightning go. After a while, Lightning has been healed and she immediately opens her eyes. She sits up quickly, and Wendy and Nana are thrilled to see her awake, bombarding her with questions about what happened. Lightning looks like she's about to cry again as the prince asks why she came back so urgently in that heavy rain. She reveals that she found the ruins from the treasure map and there are demons inside. Everyone is shocked to hear this, and Teacher Scroll looks terrified, asking if she went inside. She says no, explaining that there was a demon guarding the basement door and someone was calling for help inside, but she got scared and ran back like a coward. But the prince reassures her that she made a wise decision because a smart explorer doesn't rush into danger without assessing the situation first. Lady Leaf adds that it's possible a witch might be trapped inside since besides witches, no one else can reach the depths of the misty forest. But considering it's a ruin from 450 years ago, surviving alone there seems impossible for anyone. Lightning mentions there were no signs of human activity near the ruins, while Wendy points out that the area is teeming with terrifying wildlife and lacks suitable food, which makes it clear that someone can't live there alone. The more they ponder, the deeper the mystery gets. Lady Leaf decides they need to find a way to rescue whoever might be inside, That's when our hero steps up, urging everyone not to fret because they're not clear on the whole story yet. To find out, they've got to venture inside. He eagerly declares they're going into the ruins and he'll figure out a plan to save whoever's there. Together, they're set on facing the demon and coming out on top. Shortly after, that same noble bursts into the room, asking about Lightning's condition. Prince reassures her, and as she breathes a sigh of relief, we catch a glimpse of Margaret's peachy ass. The prince apologizes for neglecting her earlier, explaining that Lightning was in critical condition. He explains that this is precisely why he told her to take off her divine stone of judgment. The woman gets cheeky and asks if Lightning is one of those witches. The boy reluctantly confirms it, and Margaret bursts into joy, claiming she knew it all along. She proudly declares that being from the Thunder family, it's natural for Lightning to be an extraordinaire. The prince is surprised to hear this, and Margaret explains that she has watched Lightning grow up. He then asks her about her connection with Lightning, and she spills that she met her while tagging along with Lightning's dad's exploration crew. Thunder, the hero of the fjords, uncovered Twin Peak Island, Sea Dragon Fjords, and mapped out the eastern coast and Infinity Cape during their voyage. Margaret explains that Lightning was born on the ship, but sadly her mother passed away from sepsis. Being the only woman on board, Margaret stepped in as Lightning's pseudo-mom, feeding her oatmeal since breast milk wasn't an option. After the voyage, Margaret bid farewell to the crew and set up her own business in Greycastle's capital. But 10 years later, she heard that Thunder and his crew got caught in a hurricane and supposedly sank to the bottom of the ocean. She never bought into that nonsense though, and now that she's seen Lightning still kicking, she's convinced real explorers wouldn't just go down like that to some measly hurricane. The boy then asks if she's not bothered by Lightning being identified as a witch, and she bluntly says no. Nightingale, lurking in the shadows behind, taps the boy on his left shoulder to confirm the lady's honesty. On the other hand, Margaret goes on to explain that witches are both beautiful and powerful, which are the qualities she admires. She admits she wanted to adopt witches like our prince does, but the capital's prejudice against them squashes that idea. They both happily shake hands, bonding over their shared love for witches. Once they are finally partners, the woman immediately bombards our hero with questions if there are also more witches other than Lightning. She asks him how he met them, their abilities, and all that jazz. Looks like my guy's already feeling worn out just looking at her enthusiastic personality. He is not sure if he can keep up with her. Meanwhile, Theo and the other witch finally arrive at Border Town. She remarks it's quite the place for the Western realm, not what she expected the association to choose. She then grumbles about why there's no one here to roll out welcome mats for her. Theo pulls out a blue flag and waves it while standing over the hill. He explains it's a signal to the association that he has arrived with a witch at Hill. Meanwhile, the witch demands food. After hearing her demand, Theo sighs inwardly, remembering how she's been making him foot the bill for all the fancy meals on their way here, bossing him around with that massive sword of hers. And right now, she warns him once again that if he tricked her, he'll find his head rolling on the ground along with anyone else involved. Not wanting to provoke her further, he rolls his eyes and offers her the pouch of snacks. She explains that her friends should already be on a merchant ship sailing towards the fjords, making it too late for Theo even if he is trying to rat them out. Hearing this, the boy reminds her of the terrible environment at the fjords. The witch agrees, mentioning their plan to establish a sanctuary for witches there, led by Tilly Wimbledon. Once he hears that name, he is shocked to realize she's the sister of our hero. Right on cue, she notices someone approaching. She detects magical signatures and confirms that there are indeed witches nearby. Once they reach her, Nightingale immediately extends her hand and welcomes her to Border Town. As they stroll through the bustling town in the dead of night, the newcomer raises an eyebrow at the sight of children still being taught at this hour. Teacher Scroll explains it's a night school run by the town, catering not just to kids but to everyone studying here who's done with their day's work. The scar-faced woman then asks Nightingale if she is transcendent. Well, looks like our girl has never heard of this terminology before. The scar-faced woman then explains that transcendents can detect the shape and flow of magic due to transformations within their bodies caused by power. Teacher Scroll chimes in, admitting she can also sense many sisters in the crowd, but isn't sure if this qualifies her as transcendent. Scarface reveals that transcendent witches are exceedingly rare, with only 1 in thousands of witches being one. She herself has only met 3 so far, including Nightingale. The newcomer wisely advises her to keep her transcendent status under wraps, hinting that it's a closely guarded secret by the church as well. Meanwhile, Nightingale, ever vigilant, keeps a sharp eye on this new gal. She can clearly see that this woman is definitely a powerhouse, especially with that giant-ass sword that looks like it'd be a challenge for anyone to just hold. Scarface then inquires about the association's leader, Kara. In response, Nightingale somberly reveals Kara's death while she was looking for holy mountains. The new witch takes it hard and wants to know about their new boss. That is when they point her towards the castle, where all the witches also live. Hearing this, the woman's reaction is instant. She gets all edgy and asks if they've signed some shady deal with the ruler. But before she can get more rowdy, Wendy comes rushing and hugs this Scarface woman as if she's found her long-lost sister. Tears of happiness well up in Wendy's eyes as she thanks this woman for helping her back then, tearfully revealing that she is Wendy from the choir. Well, it turns out this Scarface woman is the same girl who wiped out all the priests inside that prison when Wendy was first thrown in. Shortly after, the two girls have some time alone and start catching up on the past. We also learn this woman is known as Ash. She reveals that once she escaped the cell, she went on to eliminate some of the management and even fought off the Judgment Army soldiers who tried to stop her until the Sacred Punishment Army finally arrived. Wendy curiously asks what the heck this Sacred Punishment Army is. Ash explains that it's a force made up of the church's most skilled warriors, their secret weapon against transcendent witches. They were the ones who gave her that scar on her eye. Their strength and speed matched hers, but they seemed devoid of any consciousness. When she cut off a soldier's hand, he didn't hesitate to attack back with his other hand. She wasn't about to let those pests off easily. She hid during the day in the alleys of the old holy city, coming out at night to ambush messengers and the Judgment Army. Eventually, she had to flee when the church scoured the entire city. When Ash left, her clothes were practically glued to her because of blood. All bloody. If anyone caught sight of her like that, they'd probably think she was some wild, mindless beast. Wendy tries to calm her down, saying it doesn't matter now. She can blend in and live normally here because Roland Wimbledon, their ruler, treats their sisters well. But when Ash hears our hero's name, she flips out and rips the cup with her bare hands. She demands to know if Wendy is working for Roland Wimbledon. In response, the girl reluctantly nods, and Ash grabs her hand, yanking her out, insisting they can't stick around. Well, it looks like Ash also has the same image of Roland Wimbledon as others have, and she too thinks that he is just a pervy trash. The next day rolls around, and the women finally swing by to visit the prince. It seems like she's pushing to take the witches living here, but our hero isn't too thrilled by her unreasonable requests. Ash then reminds the prince that witches aren't anyone's property. They're free people just like everyone else. The boy is surprised by her boldness, and he assures her that he never considered them his possessions. Everyone in the border town lives there by choice, and it's their best sanctuary. The prince then warns her about the fjords she wants to take them to. He explains that crossing the sea is risky, and the fjords itself is plagued by erratic weather, tsunamis, and hurricanes, which makes it an unsuitable place to live. But the girl confidently fires back that Tilly Wimbledon is the one leading the charge. The prince is gobsmacked to hear about his sister and asks if Tilly hasn't already disappeared. Ash explains that the fifth princess has already gathered a bunch of witches and taken them to the fjords for safety from the church. She's sure Tilly can lead them to create their own homeland. She also chides our hero for foolishly spreading rumors about recruiting witches, warning that he has already attracted the church's attention. Nightingale gets ticked off at her for calling the prince a fool, but he calms her down. He then asks Ash, as a transcendent witch, how many soldiers from the Sacred Punishment Army she can take down. To which, she confidently states she can handle 3 quite easily. The prince stands up from his table, brimming with confidence, and boldly challenges her, saying she'll face off against his top knight. If she loses, it proves he can defend against the church's best armies. Ash wastes no time accepting the challenge, but is disappointed when the prince says he needs a week to prepare. He suggests she hang around the castle to experience town life from a witch's perspective, hoping it might change her mind about them. The girl just starts walking off, and the prince mentions feeling déjà vu from when they first met, like he's seen her somewhere before. Hearing this, the lady gets absolutely furious, demanding to know if he actually remembers her. She turns around with bloodshot eyes and a face full of anger, making it clear she would have torn him to shreds in the past if Tilly hadn't intervened. The poor guy is clueless about what she's saying, while Anna and Nightingale immediately catch on to the situation. They both ask her if he's also groped her peach in the past, but the prince shamelessly denies it. Well, can't blame my guy, since the real old pervert Roland has been 6 feet under for ages. Anna then asks if he's sure he can beat a transcendent witch with just a knight. My guy confidently says that if he designs a rapid-fire weapon that can match her speed and strength, he's got at least a 70% chance of winning. He mentions he's already gathered all the ingredients for making the firearm, which are sitting pretty in the storage room. He goes on about the nerdy chemistry stuff involved in making it, while poor Nightingale cleans out her ears and starts walking out, since all this doesn't make any sense to her in the slightest. Meanwhile, Lady Ash still can't shake off her impression that he was just a pervy molester, but now she senses a king-like aura from the prince. Suddenly, she's abruptly attacked by Nightingale, and she quickly steps back to dodge and quickly retaliates with her massive sword. Nightingale also sidesteps the attack like no big deal. Ash asks if she's here on the prince's orders, but our girl denies it, claiming they do not pull a fast one on their guests, and she can enjoy herself in the town as much as she wants. However, Nightingale doesn't shy away while warning her that if she tries anything shady against Roland, she'll be in deep trouble. The scene then shifts to a ship peacefully sailing through the sea. On board is Professor Kyle Sichi, an alchemist known for his skills. He's heading towards the border town because Prince Roland's letter contained alchemy equations that are surprisingly genius-level and valid. Kyle tested them himself and is eager to study them further to expand his knowledge. He writes a letter to his apprentice, Charles, explaining everything and letting him know he's left the Red Alchemy Laboratory in Redwater City to sail to the border town. As this man makes his way to the castle, we catch sight of our girls, with Sister Moon demonstrating her powers by spinning a small windmill. She's feeling pretty chuffed when our prince compliments her skills and asks for her help in developing a direct current motor. The girls are all smiles, diving into learning about the law of induction. Their learning session gets interrupted by Knight Carter, who bursts in announcing the arrival of the alchemist from Redwater. The old man finally shows up before the prince, and after the pleasantries, Mr. Mustache wastes no time diving deep into discussing the equations from the prince's letters. The prince acts all chill about it, brushing it off like he stumbled upon those equations by accident. The old man is totally floored to learn that my guy came up with these equations on his own, but then he wonders if these were Royal Alchemy Society secrets. The prince just shrugs and cunningly spins the tale that these equations came from ancient books 400 years old. He slyly adds that back then, scholars preferred calling it chemistry instead of alchemy. This revelation really knocks the big mustached man for a loop. The prince nods, dropping more knowledge bombs like the law of conservation of mass, which basically says stuff doesn't just pop into existence, it just changes from one form to another. He then gives an example with a delicious cake he plans to eat, explaining how they'll absorb some parts and, well, get rid of the rest later by shitting it out. Professor Kyle still appears to be curious and asks what happens to the mass when a giant log is burned, since ashes weigh less. My guy calmly explains that the log's mass becomes gases and water vapor, leaving behind only ashes. Once my guy has the old man's attention, he casually digs through his drawers and pulls out a chemistry book, calling it a gold mine full of knowledge. He tells the old man if he wants this treasure trove, he'll need to work for him to earn it. Well, judging by the old man's reaction, it's pretty clear what his answer will be. So the prince gets down to business and offers him a fat paycheck, just like the one he used to rake in at Redwater City, with a 5-year contract. With a snap of his finger, his old advisor magically appears with ink and a pen for the professor to sign. The prince also throws in a confidentiality agreement, making sure the professor won't spill any research secrets to other alchemists. While the professor is ready to go, he's not quite sure what he'll be brewing up in the border town lab. Prince Roland confidently declares that they'll be making high-density acids, the stronger the better. Once the old man is out of the room, Nightingale appears back and calls out the prince for spinning a whole web of lies. She reminds him that just yesterday, he had the Sister Scroll memorize and create that entire book. The prince cunningly admits he spoke white lies, explaining it was the only way to convince the professor, who wouldn't believe someone like this goofball prince could come up with such knowledge. I guess the lady gets where he's coming from, but she throws him off by asking who actually taught him all that stuff. Well, the prince just can't really tell her about his days as an underpaid engineer before coming into this world, so he remains silent. But thankfully, Nightingale cuts him some slack, letting him off the hook, saying he doesn't have to say anything if he doesn't want to, because she doesn't want to hear any tall tales. In the next scene, we're at the training grounds where the prince watches a demonstration of the new toy he recently had made. Knight Carter is wielding this new gadget, which seems to be a Russian roulette-style firearm. As Carter empties the chamber, cartridges clatter to the ground, and his confident trigger pulls turn into a comedic failure. Not a single shot hits the mark. The girl standing beside our prince grows concerned as he is visibly disappointed while poor Carter looks devastated as well. But Roland tells his friend to relax, explaining that pistols are notoriously inaccurate compared to muskets. He promises Carter they'll tweak the gunpowder mix to max out this bad boy's potential. He tells him to keep practicing on the targets before facing off against the transcendent witch, Ash. Although Knight Carter isn't used to handling this gun, he can definitely appreciate its beauty and craftsmanship. Meanwhile, the prince reminds Carter not to lose the bullet casings since they're reusable and precious. Back at the castle, Lady Ash seems visibly upset. The witches living there are being stubborn and reluctant to leave. She's also scratching her head over the town's peculiarities, wondering what kind of magic Roland is using to hype up the villagers about those upcoming inventions of his. Just as she's thinking this, she spots something, and a chubby little pigeon trotting her way crashes into her. This little furball goes by the name Maggie, and she is apparently part of the 5th princess team. She asks the bird if everyone has reached the fjords, and the bird chirps back in its own language. Then, she inquires if the bird has eaten, and she sprinkles some breadcrumbs. The pigeon lights up and starts pecking at the food, but soon it becomes agitated, poking Ash angrily on her head, insisting she's not a bird. Suddenly, the seemingly ordinary bird begins to transform, turning into a cute little girl. She greets her friend once again, this time in their shared human language. The girl tells her friend that even with a tracking bracelet, it was tough to pinpoint her exact location. Thankfully, Lady Shadow tipped her off that Ash was heading to recruit more witches from the border town, and she is now really thrilled about meeting the other witches in person after her long trip. Ash somberly admits that the witches are hesitant to leave because they trust Prince Roland more than her. Maggie is surprised by how both siblings seem to have a soft spot for witches and are willing to welcome them. Ash then reveals her upcoming battle with the prince. If she loses, the prince won't allow her to take any witches, and she doesn't want to disappoint Princess Tilly by going back empty-handed. The little girl then reveals she saw a carriage with church flags as she flew here, and it was carrying around 10 people. Ash is confident they are heading to the border town due to the rumors about border town recruiting witches spread by the foolish prince across the continent. However, she's also pleased because after winning the match against them, the presence of the church will give her more reason to recruit other witches to the fjords. Once the church arrives, Roland will truly understand how badly he has messed up. Or at least, that's how Ash sees the situation. In the next scene, Lady Lightning zooms across the sky, looking super happy. She's loving these goggles she's got on because they keep her eyes comfy even when she's flying crazy fast, all thanks to the prince. Suddenly, she spots this big pigeon. Instantly, she starts daydreaming about roasting it for dinner tonight. She's tired of having buttered toast and mushrooms daily, and her mouth is practically watering at the thought of juicy roasted bird. So, she bolts straight towards the pigeon, which is, of course, not to a pigeon at all. Poor Maggie freaks out when she sees Lightning hot on her tail. She starts flapping like crazy to outrun her, but Lightning, who is renowned for her speed, quickly catches her and they both tumble to the ground. Maggie, in a panic, tries to wriggle free while Lightning whips out her knife. The sight of that sharp blade terrifies the poor pigeon even more, and that's when she decides it's time to reveal her true form. She transforms back into herself, still teary-eyed from the close call of almost becoming dinner. Lady Lightning is left staring blankly, wondering where her delicious bird went, while Maggie cries like a little baby, pretty sure she's going to get eaten before she can turn back to the 5th princess. Lightning, trying to make sense of things, asks the crying girl if she's a witch too. Maggie stops crying for a moment and, while pouting, reluctantly says yes. Our girl immediately greets her, and they exchange names, although Maggie still hasn't quite forgiven her for trying to make a meal out of her. She then notices the tracking marker on Lightning's chest, which our girl hadn't even realized was there. Maggie reveals that these special stones are used to track the wearer's location, specifically made for witches, and only react to their matched stone. That is when Lightning explains that her father gave her one, and she always thought it was just decorative jewelry. She then asks where Maggie got hers, but she refuses to spill the secret, as Ash doesn't want her to tell anyone. Mention of Lady Ash makes Lightning realize she's with her too. She explains how Ash has been trying to convince everyone to leave this place. While Lightning boasts about all the incredible inventions, weapons, and other wonders my guy has been producing, things never seen before in this world. The girl asks if she can see these wonders for herself. Lightning, with a sly grin, suggests she can, but only if she joins the Witch Union and becomes part of the border town. Of course, Maggie decides to stick with Ash, and Lightning keeps on chatting about all the cool stuff to do around here. She's going on about the mushrooms they munch on, the yummy food they feast on. Just thinking about it makes Maggie's tummy rumble. By the end of it, Lightning's got Maggie convinced to stay. She tells her to tag along if she wants to have a blast. While they zip around town, Prince Roland and the professor are busy experimenting in the alchemy lab. Meanwhile, the girls are in the forest, gathering some delicious mushrooms to munch on. Along the way, they spot Wendy too. Later that day, they spend the evening studying. The next morning, they head to the northern mountains where people are busy making bullets for guns. Back at the castle garden, they have a great time, and Maggie is enjoying every moment. Afterward, they head to the outskirts of the border town where Carter is diligently practicing his shooting, and it looks like he's improving his aim at the targets. After a few days of hanging out with Lightning, Maggie comes back to Ash a bit late. Ash asks why she's been showing up late these days. Maggie happily shifts back into her human form and tells Ash that Lightning took her bird hunting. She even offers Ash a drumstick, but she declines with a cool, "No thanks." Maggie then happily starts munching on the drumstick herself, which Ash finds kinda creepy. Watching a bird eat another bird isn't exactly normal. Then, Maggie asks why Ash hates this place so much. She also tells her own desire that she kinda wants to stay here, because Prince Roland's always throwing fun parties and sharing grub in the backyard. He's easy to chat with, not like those stuck-up elites, just a simple, caring dude. As Maggie continues to highlight the positives of their current place, Ash's response remains unchanged. She grabs her head in frustration, knowing Maggie's life was full of misery until the 5th princess took her in, so it's natural for Maggie to see the bright side of this place now. Suddenly, Ash snaps at Maggie, reminding her that this place is constantly threatened by the church, and their lives could end as soon as the border town is attacked, especially since no one can defend against the Divine Punishment Army. But Maggie confidently shrugs off the concerns, asking Ash what if they actually defeated the church. Ash nods, sharing her own hope for that outcome. That's why she wants to spar with them, to show that they can't defeat the soldiers of the Judgment Army. The day of the battle finally arrives, and Sister Echo states the rules. No hitting the head, and anyone can surrender at any time. As long as they don't die on the spot, Nana's healing ability will restore everyone to their original state. The prince asks if anyone has any questions. When no one responds, he decides to let the match begin. Both contestants stand before each other. Ash is quite concerned to see that this knight doesn't have a sword or spear. Heck, he doesn't even have any armor. She wonders if he might be using a crossbow, but she brushes off her concerns and grips her sword tightly, confident that as long as she gets close to him quickly, she can make him beg for mercy. But it looks like this isn't going to be that easy, as Carter is also ready with his gun. As soon as the prince gives the order to start the match, Captain Ironaxe immediately hits that gong with a loud bang. Both contestants wield their weapons, and Ash immediately swings her sword from afar. The mere swing of her sword startles Carter, but he takes aim and starts shooting. When Ash sees those bullets coming, she sidesteps them in the nick of time, which still leaves her grazed over her face. She takes her stance and starts running forward, determined to close the distance between them. Her speed is so fast that she feels like a blur, and even the onlookers are amazed by her such reflexes. But Carter keeps his ground and continues shooting at her, trying to hit the bullet right at the perfect place. As the bullet comes flying towards her, Ash immediately blocks it with her giant sword. In an instant, before Carter can react, she attacks him directly in the gut, sending him flying backward. Everyone anxiously awaits the outcome, and when we look at Ash's face, blood is leaking down her cheek, while her belly is totally obliterated by the gunshot. Her consciousness starts to fade as her vision blurs. The crowd rushes to heal Carter before it's too late, while Ash weakly declares her victory to our hero. She then collapses, falling into the prince's arms. Before we progress the story further, let's take a look into Ash's past. Once dismissed as nothing more than a beggar in the bustling streets, Ash's life was anything but easy. On this particular day, the town is buzzing with excitement because the princess has come of age, and they're having a grand ceremony where food will be distributed to the people. The church's prestigious Archbishop Taefun is set to host this grand event alongside the princess. Hearing the mention of the Archbishop, Ash smiles, a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, probably because she's looking forward to taking that man down. As the princess's carriage finally rolls down the streets, Ash forces her way to the front line through the crowd. The fifth princess steps out of her carriage and the crowd erupts in cheers. Amidst the sea of faces, the princess notices someone who stands out the most for her, and it was Ash. Their eyes lock and time seems to stand still. In that brief moment, there's a flicker of recognition and something unspoken passes between them. Once we're back in the castle, Ash gets summoned by the princess. A servant nudges her forward, and the princess can immediately tell she's a witch. She reassures Ash, saying she won't have to wander the streets anymore. And that is also when the fifth princess gave Ash her name, since she was nameless before that point. In the current moment, she finally wakes up from her unconscious state. The bird girl excitedly jumps at her friend and hugs Ash tightly. Ash lifts her overly enthusiastic friend and asks how long she was knocked out. The girl replies it was just one afternoon, explaining that Nana patched her up, piecing together her scattered parts to heal her belly almost completely. She continues to praise Nana's amazing healing powers, though Ash doesn't pay much attention, because her mind is already on a mission to meet our hero. While our hero was chilling alone, Lady Ash barges in like she owns the place, all excited to claim her victory in the bet. Prince Roland, being the good sport he is, admits defeat gracefully. After claiming her victory, Ash gives the prince props, saying he indeed has potential to fight against the God's Punishment Army. She's curious about the weapon Knight Carter used during their match. Prince Roland proudly shows off his pistol, thinking it's the next big thing for his troops, and everyone will be holding these bad boys in the battlefield. He even jokes about how it could turn a farmer into a formidable warrior against the army. When Ash asks for one of the guns for herself, he simply tells her to just stay here in the border town and join the Witch Association to gain access. Ash politely declines, and then drops the bombshell that she's heading back to Princess Tilly's place. She invites our hero to join them at the fjords if he ever needs shelter. In response, Roland says the same thing to her, assuring her that Bordertown doors will always be opened for her to join. Just as Ash is about to leave, Roland calls her back and offers her a custom-made sword, crafted by Anna, to replace her old busted one. The lady eagerly takes the sword, feeling a surge of confidence as she grips it. She notices it's not your run-of-the-mill blade and questions why this is feeling so weird in hand. That's when Prince Roland drops the bomb. It's called Ashbringer, and he boldly and loudly claims it's a legendary item, far superior to her old sword. Swinging the sword around, she feels its power and gladly accepts this impressive gift. Meanwhile, Roland barely saved himself from getting cut down while she was swinging around her new toy recklessly. In the next scene, we're at the camping area of the church's scout army, led by Mira. The woman plans to scout if there are actually witches in the border town. She boldly declares that if Prince Roland is indeed harboring witches, she has the power to deliver holy judgment, and she's eager to give our hero a serious beating. Her pleasant train of thought is abruptly interrupted by news of enemy warrior attacks. The knights quickly order everyone to prepare for battle. The knighted lady rushes to peek outside, but before she can react, Lady Ash cuts down all of the knights in one quick motion. It seems my girl is here to put her new sword to the test, and it's working quite effectively as she effortlessly cuts down people left and right. In one quick swing, Ash cuts the knighted lady into two pieces, leaving Priestess Mira trembling in fear at the sight of such brutality. Ash's presence exudes such thick killing intent that it feels suffocating. The priestess recoils in fear, causing that book she was holding to topple to the ground. Maggie quickly recognizes the book as the church's choir book and smoothly grabs it. On the other hand, Lady Ash raises her sword. Then she begins her torture of this priestess, just like the church did with the witches. After taking her life, she digs a grave for her and drags her inside it. Maggie asks her friend why she did this, because if the church finds it out, shit is going to get real bad. Ash explains that by the time the church finds out their messenger group has disappeared, 2 or 3 months will have already passed. She clarifies that no matter how Roland Wimbledon handles the situation, the cooperation with the witches will eventually be exposed. Then, she shows her the messages they've been sending via carrier pigeons to Hermes to report on the situation. Maggie declares she's already nabbed all the pigeons, so there won't be any reports back to the church. Hearing this, Ash adds that this buys Bordertown some much-needed time before the church's army strikes, and she is feeling pretty proud that she is doing a favor to our hero by doing that. Maggie gives her friend a thumbs up for her mastermind plan, and for some reason, Lady Ash grants our pigeon girl permission to stay in Bordertown. The little girl mentions she likes Lady Tilly too. Ash then tells her to just visit the fjords once a month. This way, she can keep tabs on what's happening in Bordertown and facilitate communication between both sides. It's a plan to help Bordertown escape to the fjords if things get messy. Maggie is over the moon to hear this, and just as the sun peeks over the horizon, we're back at the Bordertown castle. Here, Sir Ferlin Eltec has been invited to a royal feast by the generous prince. Roland urges them both not to hold back and to enjoy the feast to their heart's content. Ferlin humbly thanks him for the honor of dining there, and his wife, Irene Eltec, also expresses gratitude. She specifically thanks our hero for allowing her to become a teacher. Roland credits Sister Scroll, in charge of the Ministry of Education, for arranging everything. Irene cuts to the chase and asks why they've been called there exactly. Roland enthusiastically reveals his plan. For the first half of this year, he wants a play performed in the town square every weekend. He already has scripts, props, funding ready, and now he just needs a cast. Knowing Irene used to be an actor back in the Longsong Fortress, he asks her to play the role of Star in this play. The lady hesitates at first about taking on such a major role, but our hero waves a fat paycheck her way for her job. Her husband encourages her, noting it's always been her dream, and he wholeheartedly supports her. The couple gets a bit romantic with each other, making our hero feel a tad awkward. He clears his throat awkwardly and then proceeds to hand them the scripts. He explains that the first play is Cinderella, a romance between a commoner woman and a prince. The second is Midnight Crow, where the little guys stick it to their greedy landlords. The last one, Witch's Diary, is an original they crafted with Miss Scroll, and he's genuinely excited and proud of it. The wife is absolutely amazed by all these scripts, and our hero is pumped to kick off the cultural scene. He's really eager to use plays to counter the church's propaganda and promote progressive ideals. Next scene zooms in on our pretty pigeon girl, totally floored by the feast spread out before her. Unlike the usual cheap buffets we hit up, this spread is top-notch. Everyone warmly welcomes Maggie into the fold. Our boy tries to introduce himself formally, but the little girl is too busy ogling those barbecue sticks to even notice the prince's introduction. At that moment, the girl can't hold back her hunger any longer, but Wendy jumps in with her own introductions, while Lady Moon encourages the girl to try the barbecue sauce made by the prince himself. She dips her finger into the sauce, and once she puts her finger into her mouth, she is absolutely thrilled to have it. Her taste buds are doing the happy dance. This is something she has never tasted before in her life. Everyone gathers around her as she enjoys her barbecue stick. They're all curious about her pigeon form and ask if she can transform into other birds. Proudly, she says yes and demonstrates by changing into a sparrow, then a seagull, and finally a cute little parrot. Her adorable transformations capture everyone's hearts, and they can't take their eyes off her. Anna turns to Roland with curiosity, admitting she never thought that the fifth princess was also gathering witches together. Roland shares her astonishment, revealing his intention to send a letter to his sister to team up with her. Maggie will deliver the letter once she returns to the fjords next month. Speaking of Maggie, Anna finds the prospect of flying really amazing and excitedly expresses her desire to fly like birds in the open sky. Well, looks like my guy has already got everything covered. Right in the next scene, a hot air balloon appears, granting Anna's wish as she soars through the skies. From up high, everything seems so small, and Anna sees the border town for the first time from a bird's eye view. Here they go again, chatting about all the nerdy stuff like how the hot air balloon works. But I'll spare you the details since we're here to have fun. The prince says one thing to Anna. Right now, everything depends on her black fire to work. Suddenly, Anna spots a redwater river and can see everything from above. The test fields Sister Leaf uses, and the recently built factories. Well, looks like along with the era of industrialization, my guy has also started the era of pollution and climate change. The prince gives her all the credit, explaining that because of her, everything started and they were able to build everything. Anna is amazed to see everything, and that's when the prince takes his chance and gets closer. He grabs her hand, but the mood immediately dampens when Anna reveals that her mother died in a fire. She somberly reveals that not only did she narrowly escape the thick smoke and fire, but she also became a witch herself. That's why she's hated flames for so long and struggled with self-acceptance. When she was imprisoned, she thought facing her sentence might bring relief, but the prince rescued her and taught her to harness her abilities. Now, she's realizing flames can be used for more than just destruction and suffering. She gives all the credit to the prince for helping her change her mindset and use her abilities for good. As the mood sets in and the prince blushes, they share another kiss. After that, what happened in the balloon is anyone's guess. All we hear is a resounding voice of claps, probably because they're playing something fun. After their short journey, the balloon comes down, and everyone is genuinely thrilled to see it land. Some politely scold the prince for pulling such a risky stunt, but he owns up to his recklessness and explains that Maggie and Lightning were following them as backup. One witch then smirks at Lightning and Maggie, saying they're not the only ones who can fly now. Lightning and Maggie shoot back, noting the balloon's not exactly a speed demon, because they've already circled the castle about 20 times before it touched the ground. Nana seems super pumped to take a ride in the sky too, and they all eagerly ask if they can hop on the balloon. Anna explains it can only hold 2 people at a time. Meanwhile, the prince is still busy apologizing to the ladies for going in the sky like that. And as Anna and the prince are getting grilled by the others, they accidentally bump into each other while stepping back. They share a smile, perhaps because the prince enjoyed playing clap-clap with her in the balloon. Meanwhile, Nightingale, munching on snacks as usual, feels a bit left out. She probably wanted to ride with the prince too. Even her precious cake slips off her plate and falls to the ground, and she quietly walks away. Once he's off the hook from the questioning, the prince waves to the girls and starts to leave. On the other hand, Wendy also notices Nightingale's absence. As night falls, we find Nightingale sitting alone, looking kind of down. Wendy pops into view and asks her why she slipped away quietly this afternoon. Nightingale stays mum at first, just saying it's nothing. But then Wendy pulls her clothes aside, flashing her impressive assets under her gown, reminding Nightingale she can chat to her about anything. Nightingale blushes, probably because Wendy's bosom is bigger than hers. Later, they're lying side by side on the bed, and Wendy keeps nudging her friend to spill what's on her mind. Nightingale reminds her friend that what the prince said about marrying a witch was true because she can tell when someone is lying. Wendy immediately warns her never to reveal this to anyone in the Witch Union. When Nightingale asks why, Wendy explains that the prince is destined to become the king of Grey Castle, and the kingdom might not support a king without an heir, which could also affect the future of witches. Wendy also senses that her friend is bothered by the close relationship between our prince and Anna. She asks Nightingale if she would rather become the queen or stay by the prince's side as she is. Nightingale chooses the latter. Wendy reassures her that she's already by the prince's side, so there's nothing to worry about. She advises her to come to terms with it and live happily just being beside the princess. The scene shifts to the Holy City, where someone is getting brutally tortured by these filthy priests in the name of ceremony. The pain is so intense that the man begs for death instead of enduring it. Meanwhile, Archbishop Maine seems to be really nervous. Just then, the big boss of the church arrives and orders Maine to stop. Priest Maine spills the beans right away that this guy also flunked the test for the elite judgment army, and the man before us is undoubtedly Pope O'Brien. The Pope tells him to let the guy rest, and when he says rest, he meant to cut this failed subject off brutally right then and there. Then the Pope grabs his junior's hand and assures him that back in the day, he was way more nervous than him when he first hosted the ceremony. He mentions he even puked all over the place at 45, and the smell of blood made him dizzy. Maine then asks his senior if it's really necessary to go through with this ceremony and how many soldiers they want to transform into the Judgment Army. The old man just walks off, telling him to hang tight. He says that when he becomes the next pope, all his questions will be answered in the church's secret library. Suddenly, a man grabs their attention, and Pope is absolutely thrilled to see if he's going to participate in the ceremony. The man on the ground agrees and introduces himself as Rekut Rot, part of the Holy City Guard team. He's honored to take part in the transformation ceremony. Shortly after, they bring in a witch who has already been rendered unconscious with dreamland water. They tie this new man to the same bench as the one before him and immediately begin extracting the witch's blood. They mix it with some divine stones of judgment, and the mixture turns into a mysterious bluish liquid even the archbishop has no clue about. Then they inject this solution into the man's body. There's a possibility he'll undergo a transformation into a god's punishment warrior, also known as the Judgment Army, who is as strong as they come. However, if the transformation works out, it wipes out their emotions and smarts, turning them into mindless ghouls with just instincts and a tiny bit of will left. There's also a chance they might fail and suffer like hell, or even kick the bucket. But the priests are all in because it's their only shot at fighting demons. Looks like this man has passed the transformation process. Soon after, we spot both the junior and senior priests together. The Pope gives main props for pulling off a solid transformation ceremony. 62 warriors joined in, and more than half of them succeeded. Then the old man brings up this new kind of poison, produced by Master Crow's eyes. If it's slapped on a rotting corpse, it spreads out to the area around it. This stuff floats through the air, so you don't need to eat it or touch it to get affected. There's no cure for it either. Pope, sounding all ominous, asks why they don't just use this against Grey Castle. Back in Border Town, everything's peaceful, and Anna's totally blown away by the scenery from the hot air balloon. She turns to Soraya, asking if she feels the same. But Anna is left speechless for a moment when she sees all the paintings Soraya has been whipping up of the scenery they've seen from up high. Anna stumbles over her words, trying to say something about the paintings, while Soraya waits for her response curiously. Once they finally touch down on the ground, the prince bursts into the room, radiating happiness because he's heard that Soraya's painting style has undergone a drastic change. When Nightingale's eyes fall on Soraya, she's immediately shocked to realize that her magical abilities have transformed dramatically. The prince asks if her powers have evolved like Anna's, and when he sees Soraya's new paintings, he notices the thick textures of fluffy clouds, gritty castle walls, and tree bark so thick it's almost like you could touch it. It makes the paintings feel super real. Meanwhile, Soraya admits that she can increase the thickness further but didn't do it because it would cause her a lot of pain. Nightingale tries to peel off the texture of the tree but fails. Then Anna uses her strings to pop out the texture, which looks like real wood. The prince turns to the painter, asking how she increased the thickness of the paintings. She suddenly gets it and spills that it's all because of what she saw from the balloon, stuff she'd never seen before. Her old paintings, which she thought were realistic, turned out to be totally off. Like trees looking all pointy and mountains not making sense, everything was like in 2D. So, she wanted her art to match those epic views. She started thinking about those tiny balls our hero talked about, which are atoms, and she imagined her brushstrokes as layers of colorful balls stacking up to create the whole picture. And bam, her paintings get textures, green trees popping up, and deep blue rivers sinking down, which gives the paintings a 3D effect. Soraya blushes, claiming her ability isn't as useful as Anna's since all she can do is paint. The prince reassures her it's valuable and he has the perfect idea, hinting it's related to her bathing issues. Soraya feels embarrassed, while Nightingale gives him a suspicious stare. The prince explains that rather than calling what Soraya creates paint, it's more like a coating made by magic. If it passes material testing, he believes they can use it to build water pipes. The girls ask what they're going to do with them, and he explains that no one will need to haul water for baths every day. They can have pipes in their rooms. He describes using an iron pipe as a mold, wrapping it in paper, and having Soraya coat the mold with her magic coating. Once the coating has dried down, it will act as a pipe. Meanwhile, Nightingale notices how the prince gets super hyped about nerdy stuff. When she sees him getting really close to Anna, she immediately feels jealous. She quickly looks away and slams her hand on the desk while standing there with an annoyed look on her face. It doesn't take long for the prince to notice she's definitely upset about something. Shortly after, we see the prince alone, deep in thought about creating a giant tank to hold Redwater River water. He plans to use steam engines to transport the water into the tanks. Once every household has water, he can easily set up bathrooms and toilets. He's feeling pretty pleased with himself about the idea. He stretches his back after a long stretch of work and finds himself missing Nightingale's presence. He decides to call her, but he gets no response from her. A mischievous glint flickers in his eyes as he considers doing something unthinkable. Yep, you guessed it right. He is planning to munch on the snacks Nightingale has stashed in her drawer. But before he can act on his thought, the lady herself appears and firmly warns him not to lay a finger on her dried fish. Prince then asks her why she's feeling a bit let down lately, and she responds that she was just following his earlier directive not to bother him. The prince apologizes, admitting he's been busy lately, and he's grateful she's always there to watch over him. He opens the drawer again, revealing a specially crafted gun. He explains he wanted to give it to her earlier, but it took longer than expected to carve the patterns on this beauty. This revolver is completely different and far superior to anything they've made before. Nightingale eagerly takes it. She's momentarily speechless, stammering out a thanks, then happily requests if he can teach her how to use the revolver. Once they step outside, Nightingale immediately starts her shooting practice. Surprisingly, she hits the target dead on with her first try, which is impressive considering poor Knight Carter hadn't hit a single bullseye after days of training. She asks if she did better, and the prince nods approvingly, mentioning she'll move on to a training simulation next. Nightingale is clueless about what's next, so our hero explains that hanging over the targets are stones of divine judgment, and she needs to take them down in the shortest time possible while she is exposed to their effects. After understanding her task, she prepares herself. Just before she dives in, the prince stops her and tells her to pull the trigger, adding with a grin, "Remember to shout, 'It's high noon.'" Cheekily, she turns around and asks if it's a suggestion or an order. Nevertheless, she gets ready. Memories of past heroics flood her mind when Wendy had told her that she's already by the prince's side. With a deep breath, she begins striking those divine stones of judgment, hitting each one with precision, reminding herself that she's his shield and will always stand by his side. The big day finally arrives, and the entire town gathers to watch the play they've been training for. The best part? Well, it's free for everyone. The prince has even invited the merchant Lady Margaret. Among the crowd is another merchant, Hogg, who finds the food delicious and otherworldly. Meanwhile, Fjord's merchant Marlon is super impressed by the quality and material of the cups, and he's ready to buy a few for himself. As the merchants continue their business talk, Lady Margaret apologizes on their behalf. She says that merchants are just laymen who can't stop talking about money and is sorry they're taking up his time. Meanwhile, up in the sky, Lightning is having a blast munching on popcorn, while Maggie looks annoyed that she's hogging it all for herself. Down on the ground, the prince is surprised that Lightning didn't recognize Margaret, even though she's been like a mother figure to her. Margaret explains they parted ways when she was very young, so it's no wonder she doesn't remember, and she only wants to reconnect back with her naturally. Margaret then asks about this snack called popcorn, and wonders if it's also a royal family snack. Our hero nods yes, but in reality, he's had Nana's help in making these popcorns from Sister Leaf's special corn. He can't imagine watching a show without munching on them. Well, Margaret isn't fully convinced yet, because she has lived in the king's city before. Without being rude, she asks him to hold off on flattering her, and then asks about his closest friend in the city. It turns out Prince Roland didn't have one, as he was just a flirtatious guy, and his closest companion was his magical hand, Yorko, which he used to grope every woman around the castle. Margaret starts chuckling and points out that she's also heard he used to be quite the ladies' man in the castle. Poor Roland feels a bit embarrassed that he let slip something awkward to her. He then changes the topic and urges everyone to focus on the play, and thus begins the story of Girl Cinderella, with Lady Irene, wife of Ferlin Eltec, playing the role of Cinderella. Another standout in the cast is May, known as the Star of the West, who looks stunning on stage. It doesn't take Margaret long to realize who she is, and she's totally amazed to see her there. Prince Roland tells her to watch quietly, but Margaret is so excited she can't help but sing May's praises loudly. It seems our hero hadn't anticipated Lady Irene would bring such a renowned friend to perform here in the border town. As the show continues, May's acting looks incredibly realistic. When she pushes Cinderella to the ground, the shove is so lifelike and powerful that everyone in the crowd becomes genuinely concerned. Even Prince Roland feels like that push was personal. As the play continues once again, the whole crowd is totally hooked, and even Lady Irene can't help but notice how her friend has everyone's attention. During the break, someone in the audience comments that the performance was so realistic they got a bit scared, encouraging Lady Irene to keep up the great work. She agrees enthusiastically, and this time Irene is determined to win everyone over with her own skills. When the play resumes, Lightning also has a little role of her own, playing a cute witch. Let's skip the play details, but by the end of this scene, it's Sister Irene who steals the show. May, usually flawless in her acting, finds herself overshadowed this time by Irene's outstanding performance. Well, it looks like seeing her friend win has made her even sadder. This guy Ferlin has been the target of countless women in Longsong Fortress, and in the end, he chose Irene. Now she can't help but cry her eyes out over this love triangle drama. As she walks off the stage, she notices Knight Carter holding a bouquet of flowers. He introduces himself as Chief Knight Carter Lannis, the prince's knight, and he gives her props for her incredible performance. Not one to waste time, he immediately invites her for a drink, leaving her blushing and feeling quite happy inside. The scene shifts to Longsong Fortress, where the soldiers from Grey Castle have arrived. Upon seeing their familiar flag fluttering, the ambassador starts to lose his cool. Below, the knight introduces himself as Lehman Hawes, King Timothy's messenger, and he has brought a message from the king's city. He requests to lower the drawbridge to allow them entry, One of the knights quickly brings the permit, and the ambassador quickly takes a look at it, only to find out that this is indeed stamped with Timothy's emblem. Petrov quickly realizes that he can't turn down the new king's messenger like that, or he will be picking up a needless fight with the king's city of Grey Castle. With that in mind, he tells his soldier to grab 3 quick horses and make a dash for Border Town, and deliver the message to Roland that Timothy's crew is on the doorstep. Imagine if they had something like Skype to communicate. It would be quite a sight to see all the kings and princes having a heated conference call, probably more toxic than a Call of Duty lobby. Once the soldier dashes off, Petrov hopes Prince Roland gets the news soon. With the enemy's messenger group numbering less than 50, they don't pose much of a threat. All Petrov can do now is let them inside, and as the gate lowers, those knights below exude an ominous energy, and I'm pretty sure that shit is about to get real. Meanwhile, back in Border Town, it seems Prince Roland has finally brought the first bathtub into this world. Everyone bombards him with questions, and he patiently explains everything. When the tap is turned, water flows out, leaving everyone amazed and curious. They are curious to know if they can drink it, and from where it is coming. Prince Roland explains it's not safe to drink directly without boiling first, and Anna then elaborates on the principle of a siphon, showing how they can transfer water using this basic method. They've positioned a tank of this water at a higher elevation to ensure it reaches everyone's homes effectively. As Prince Roland gets caught up teaching everyone the nerdy ins and outs, our not-so-sophisticated lady just couldn't resist poking at the tap to see what would happen. As you can imagine, water starts gushing out like rain from the steel pipe above. Prince Roland quickly steps in to give a quick rundown on how the shower head works. Meanwhile, Sister Lily jumps in with a bit of sass, asking if the prince spent his whole week at the castle just to make his bathing more comfy. She's not shy about pointing out how nobles love their comforts, and he seems no different. Lady Scroll shuts Lily down with a quick, shush. But Prince Roland stays cool, explaining that chasing comfort drives human progress, and he's no stranger to that. Despite his casual yet clever response, Lily just sneers and turns her head away. Later on, when the prince is alone, Lady Scroll swings by to apologize for Lily's antics, but our boy just shrugs it off, saying it's no big deal. Well, since we haven't heard much about Sister Lily until now, Lady Scroll decides to reveal how she's been deceived many times and now finds it hard to trust others. Lady Scroll starts off telling us how she sniffed out Sister Lily using her magic power sensing abilities, right in one of the shelters in Redwater City. Basically, in the past, Lady Scroll would travel through towns pretending to be the wife of a noble interested in adopting a child, all the while carefully observing to find awakened sisters like Lily. However, when she tried to adopt Lily, she was refused by the shelter owner, who insisted on waiting until the children reached adulthood before they could be adopted. This refusal raised red flags, prompting Nightingale to dig into the orphanage's finances. Turns out, over the past decade, 3 witches were handed off to the church. The good-looking ones got dolled up and sold to nobles, while the others were left to die in the forest behind the shelter. When they grilled the shelter owner, it turns out he wasn't running the shelter for the cash. He got a sick thrill from controlling and even killing the girls. That is when their leader Kara, understandably furious, took justice into her own hands and killed that man. When they tried to invite the girls into the association, many of them looked at the association members with hatred. It was as if they were feeling robbed of a chance to be adopted by nobles. Lily was no different until Kara showed the bodies of their friends who were supposed to have been adopted, now dead in the woods behind the shelter. The sight was so overwhelming that Lily vomited and passed out in Wendy's arms. When she woke up, she seemed emotionally numb, like a doll. Under Wendy's nurturing care, Lily gradually recovered, but her experience left her with a deep-seated resentment towards nobles, which might explain her sometimes harsh behavior towards our hero. The prince starts feeling sorry for Lily, realizing she still manages to smile despite everything she's been through. Then, Lady Scroll pops the question, and our hero gives her the go-ahead to ask. Right on cue, Sister Scroll calls out to Nightingale, who promptly shows up from the shadows. By now, Roland is clueless about what these ladies are actually plotting. Lady Scroll finally asks the prince a rather awkward question, which is that since he's planning to marry a witch, does he know that witches can't get pregnant? The prince finds this a bit blunt, and asks if it's confirmed or just speculation. Lady Scroll sadly confirms that it's a harsh truth, which is backed by history itself since there's no record of witches ever getting pregnant. Roland thinks of it like reproductive isolation, wondering if witches have evolved into a whole new species that can't mix genes with regular folks. But the prince shrugs it off for now, deciding to chew on that idea later. For him, his love for Anna isn't tied to whether she can have kids or not. He's more excited about setting up a political system that's fair and doesn't favor family connections. Plus, he sees the lack of kids as a perk. It stops powerful family clans from forming, which he thinks could bring witches and regular folks closer together to work as a team. Suddenly, Nightingale interrupts him and asks what's on his mind. He's caught off guard at first, but then assures her that his feelings haven't changed, and he's still up for marrying a witch. After Lady Scroll quietly leaves, Roland wonders aloud if she's happy or disappointed. Nightingale stays silent as well, leaving Roland to play it cool and assume everything's all right. Just then, someone slams the door open. Night Carter bursts in, reporting urgent news. Longsong Fortress has been taken over by a group from the King's City, and Mr. Petrov has been imprisoned. The prince is floored by the news, especially when Carter adds that there were only 50 knights who managed to seize the entire fortress. The next scene takes us at the Longsong Fortress's cathedral, and it's a total bloodbath of soldiers. The priest of the church is shocked to see these enemy knights, likely under the influence of those same pills. Knight Lehman states that it's all thanks to the church for helping them capture the entire Longsong. He raises his sword and, before striking down the priest, declares that with this speed, King Timothy will quickly unify Grey Castle. With that, he cuts the man down. Another knight appears and informs Sir Lehman that they've found more pills in the basement, 4 boxes, totaling at least a few thousand pills. Sir Lehman is thrilled to hear this and mentions that about 1,000 soldiers will soon arrive here. With this many pills, they'll have more than enough before entering the battlefield against the border town. He's all pumped to see our prince's face when he wipes him out completely. Back at Border Town, Prince Roland waits anxiously for his scouts who were sent to assess the situation at Longsong Fortress. Right on cue, Nightingale perks up with a smile as she spots Lightning and Maggie returning, who deftly land in the office through the window. Lightning doesn't waste a single breath before announcing they've departed Longsong Fortress and are heading straight here with around 1,000 people. The prince is shocked to hear this, wondering how those 50 soldiers multiplied into 1,000. Maggie then reveals that only 6 of them are on horseback. The rest are on foot. She further explains they're dressed plainly, many without armor, and their weapons are mostly spears, with a few swords mixed in. The prince perks up right away, figuring from the description that they're probably civilians or serfs in the army, so he's scratching his head wondering why Timothy would send in such cannon fodder. He wonders why Timothy hasn't learned anything from the border town's battle with Duke Ryan, where 200 knights couldn't even tickle the border town. Then it finally hits him like a thunderbolt, and the prince figures out that they're trying to plow through all that gunfire using the church's pills. He never doubted from the start that the church was supporting Timothy. If the border town has to face this army of thousands, he's pretty sure his first army will take a heavy blow. The prince then asks if those people were carrying the divine stone of judgments. Lightning says she didn't dare to get closer, but that little bird over there saw everything once she turned into a hawk. While Maggie's chowing down on cake, she responds that she didn't see any stones, but there's a chance they might be hidden in their clothes. The prince then tasks Nightingale to go with Maggie again alongside the river. When they encounter the passing ships, Nightingale should get close to them while hiding within her fog. Once she's close enough, she needs to see if they're holding any divine stones of judgment. Nightingale just climbed out the window, and they flew off. The prince, stuck behind, curses himself for not paying enough attention to Longsong Fortress and making the dumb move of taking all the soldiers to Border Town, leaving poor Ambassador Petrov defenseless. But Anna quickly tells him to save his worries and regrets for later because he still has to figure out how to deal with the approaching army of 1,000, which will be here in 3 days. She gives him a tight hug and assures him that they won't leave his side, no matter what happens. Shortly after, we see the town gearing up for battle, and Nightingale has returned. The prince asks if she found anything, and she reports back that there were only a few of those divine judgment stones. Lightning then asks about those holes they're digging, and the prince explains they're for bunkers. Both ladies look puzzled, so he clarifies that walls will surround these holes, leaving a small window for soldiers to shoot bullets while staying safe inside. He wants to protect his soldiers from those crazed pill-induced people shooting spears, and only bunkers can offer perfect defense against them. He has also organized 20 groups, each handling 1 artillery piece, which is a 12-pound field gun with a range of over 1,000 meters. The girls are absolutely thrilled to hear this, because with these guns, they're practically unbeatable. The prince suggests the returning scout group grab a bite since they must be starving after their trip. Meanwhile, Nightingale tells Anna to stick close to Prince Roland during the battle because she has a special mission to handle, to which Anna agrees and tells her friend to leave this to her. In the next scene, we see soldiers marching down, led by the ruthless Knight Lehman, urging his party to hurry up. He remarks that if this were the King's City Knights, Roland's head would already be returned to King Timothy. His friend advises him to just chill, noting that without those pills, these people would still be untrained morons. He adds that as a knight who's trained since childhood, the pills feel like they've invalidated all those years of hard work, as even unarmed farmers can fight after taking them. Lehman counters by reminding his friend that those who take the pills suffer greatly once their effects wear off. Meanwhile, we also see Nightingale keeping a watchful eye on these people. And shortly after, they hit the brakes, and the knight announces to his captain that they've spotted Border Town's troops. Lehman expresses amazement, noting he never expected Ambassador Petrov to notify Roland so quickly. He reveals he's heard rumors about Border Town using long-range weapons in their battle with Duke Ryan. When those weapons fired, there was a bright flash and a big boom. He's pretty sure those big wheeled things he sees are those weapons, but they look way bigger than what he heard. His buddy next to him just says they gotta hustle to dodge the constant firing. His friend nods, saying they've got 1,500 guys, and after popping those pills, they can sprint like racehorses, so this time they can wipe the border town quite easily. That is when he catches Nightingale's chilling voice, which totally freaks him out. He spins around after hearing that ominous whisper, but there's nothing there. Even his friends swear he didn't hear a thing. Captain Lehman tells his friend Levin to take some people into the woods for a pincer attack. He rallies everyone up, and that's when Lady Echo shows up out of nowhere. She immediately mimics Vice Captain Levin's voice, ordering the soldiers to gulp down their pills and charge ahead. The soldiers get all fired up and immediately pop their pills. Lehman is stunned, wondering what the hell is going on. He asks Levin what the hell he did, and that's when Nightingale appears, her gun's barrel aimed straight at his head. With a single pull of the trigger, she scrambles his brain entirely. The confident captain finally tumbles off his horse, leaving his friend in shock. Meanwhile, the soldiers just keep marching forward like nothing happened to their captain. Levin gags at the gruesome sight, while he also hears someone mimic his voice and order the brainwashed soldiers to take over Border Town. When he realizes there's a witch mimicking his voice, it's already too late. Everyone is marching forward, ignoring his attempts to halt them. Some soldiers even try to attack him, but he quickly deals with them in anger, dead set on finding these witches and tearing out their throats with his bare hands. Meanwhile, back in Border Town, our soldiers start blasting those mindless folks with cannonballs, scattering them like pinballs. Those who manage to get close to the bunkers face gunfire, bringing down them for good. Our soldiers are freaking out to see these damn people running super fast even after losing their limbs. Captain Brian finally understands why the prince warned them that these people are more like demonic beasts than humans. The soldiers reveal that the mindless people are closing in. Brian orders everyone to aim and start firing. Once they do, the bullets find their marks right on target, and the soldiers keep firing relentlessly without flinching. Captain Thin Mustache reloads his gun and suddenly spots a mindless knight climbing up the bunker. He gladly aims and shoots the monster right in the head. Suddenly, a soldier is left staring outside, but the captain yells at him to get down quick because the mindless people are throwing spears at lightning speed. However, the spears do nothing as they just hit the bunker wall and bounce to the ground. One soldier even jokes that he nearly shat his pants seeing those spears, but they turned out to be useless against the bunkers. But sadly, their assumptions are immediately proven wrong when a spear finds its mark right in one soldier's shoulder, causing him to collapse in pain. The captain is shocked and he quickly tells his soldiers to keep firing as he will look after him. The captain grabs the man's hand as he asks if he's going to die. The captain knows he is in bad condition, but not life-threatening. He can't pull out the spear recklessly, or it'll bleed more. He's confident Nana can save him and tells the soldier to hang on because he's not dying today. He assures the trembling soldier that once they finish fighting, they'll rush to Nana as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the mindless soldiers continue to charge at incredible speed across the littered ground strewn with corpses. They run between the fallen bodies with no regard. One of our elite soldiers quickly directs his comrades to adjust the cannons for a firing range of 300 meters and load the grapeshot rounds. With the command to fire, the giant cannonballs soar through the air, tearing through the ranks of the mindless attackers. Suddenly, one of those mindless guys snaps out of this pill's effect. He shakes in fear as he sees one of those giant balls stopping just short of his legs. He immediately bolts back, not wanting to risk getting flattened. After all, he's got 3 wives waiting for him at home. Damn, that's a lot of wives for a regular guy. Other soldiers decide to retreat too, finally realizing they were charging to their deaths for no good reason. Meanwhile, a stubborn soldier sticks to his guns instead of running. But let's be real. Who wouldn't rather be called a coward than take a 100-pound cannonball to the chest? The prince notices the enemies starting to scatter and disperse. He feels a pang of sorrow, knowing the pill might stop pain, but not fear. He's especially disgusted that Timothy used innocent civilians who aren't even soldiers. The guy with the spear in his shoulder has finally been brought to the infirmary, where Anna starts healing him right away. Meanwhile, back in the woods, Nightingale gets sniped by the enemy, but she disappears in the blink of an eye. The knight reports her escape, making Levin furious. He scolds his soldier for missing her when she was right in front of them. He orders his men to take the pill and bring her down as soon as she reappears. Meanwhile, roots and branches start creeping from above. Before the fools can react, Lady Leaf chokes them by their throats. Levin hasn't even finished cursing his rotten luck when Nightingale reappears. They lock eyes, and the man calls her a demon, but he soon notices that she's a witch. His last thought is about how beautiful she is before our girl pulls that trigger. The sun hadn't even gone down, and the battle was already wrapped up. Nightingale thought this one was way easier than the Duke's brawl. We only had 5 casualties, but they got treated in time. The prince immediately ordered not to kill anyone once those enemy soldiers' pill effects wore off. He assigned Lightning and Maggie to keep an eye on things, while the First Army was tasked with clearing the battlefield, and when the pill effects wore off, the civilians suffered massive side effects. The pursuit team gathered them up and pushed them towards the Longsong stronghold. The information extracted from the captured knights was used to systematically eliminate the remaining enemy forces at Longsong Fortress. They also secured Ambassador Petrov's release unharmed. Since he was part of one of the most influential families, the enemy knights did not dare to lay a finger on him. The prince also comes up with all new plans to ensure this mess never happens again. He decides to build up the army, lay down some roads, and bring universal education to Longsong Fortress. After sorting everything out, he decides to head back to Border Town, telling Ambassador Petrov to step up and not let him down again. The redhead nods in agreement. Petrov then asks what to do with the captives locked up in the bars. The prince tells him to set them free, knowing they won't last long anyway due to the pill's side effects. Once our hero wraps things up at Longsong Fortress, he sets sail back to Border Town. It's early morning, and Nightingale asks why he's up so early, telling him to catch more sleep. She then asks if he's worried about the civilians who took the pill. It seems her hunch is right on the mark. He is still bothered by the fact that they were all forced by Timothy. He points out that if they hadn't taken those damn pills and been controlled by others, they wouldn't have died needlessly in some strange place they did not even know. The woman tries to reassure him, saying it's not his fault. But he responds that even if it's not his fault, he couldn't stop them, and many more will be sacrificed in Timothy's fight for the throne. And the ones who are pulling the strings from behind and making those pills will have to pay for this bloodshed as well. She then asks if he plans to take down the church so it stops causing trouble and everyone can live happily together with the witches. He grins and says that's exactly the plan. The next scene takes us out to sea, where we finally see Lady Ash after a long absence. Her eye patch-wearing companion asks why she settled on Sleeping Island when there are larger islands like Crescent Moon Bay in the fjords. Not to mention, Sleeping Island sometimes submerges once the tides are high. Ash reminds him that not many people are interested in bumping into witches, and further explains that while Sleeping Island will eventually sink, that's why it's still empty despite being the third largest in the fjords. But the man states that size doesn't matter if it's unlivable, to which she reminds him that since witches can tweak nature itself, she's not sweating it. They'll make it their own territory, away from the oppression of the church. She then asks the old man when was the last time he went to Sleeping Island. He says it was around a month ago when he brought a group of witches to plant a full field of pearl rice there. He recalls how playful and wonderful they all were. Suddenly, another sailor spots something nearby and alerts the captain. It looks like a giant boulder, but it's massive in size. The captain finds it hard to believe since the only landmass nearby is Sleeping Island. It doesn't make sense for there to be boulders out here. But the report insists his eyes aren't deceiving him. Meanwhile, Ash just smirks. By now, we know who's behind this. When the captain sees it for himself, he's utterly baffled. Sleeping Island has risen higher. Ash reminds him that this is what she meant about witches tinkering with nature. As we finally arrive over this island land, the witches rush out, with one particularly enthusiastic witch named Honey leading the charge. A girl with green eyes tells her to simmer down. Outside, the two witches suddenly notice something. When they turn around, the green-eyed girl quickly uses her abilities and recognizes that they're here. Ash is back. Once the ship reaches the shore, Sister Molly is the first to greet Lady Ash, and Our Lady promptly gives the little girl a pat on the head for her politeness. Meanwhile, Sailor Jack is amazed at how this place, once a hellhole, has turned into heaven. Molly then reveals they didn't raise the island like he thought. They just erected a wall around Sleeping Island. Ash then turns to the little girl and asks if she can help carry some goods. The girl gets excited and summons her water blob, which immediately picks up the boxes and starts walking with everyone else. Jack gives a middle finger to his nervous companions, who are scared of witches, reminding them that even if they combine their strength, they can't compare to Molly's little water blob. They invite Molly to join them, but the little girl bluntly declines. After finally reaching the heart of the island, Ash feels like she's back home at last. The captain is also completely amazed to see this transformation. He can't believe they've turned the island into a fortress. Inside, the place isn't flooded even during high tide, and the captain is pretty sure they're living below sea level right now. He points out two docks, one on the seafloor and another at the water's surface. He asks if both are usable, and Molly nods, saying the surface one works during high tide, while the submerged one is for low tide. That way, they can dock any ship no matter the tide. While Ash admires the place, Molly gestures towards the north and points out Lady Tilly's palace. They decide to split up since there are more goods to unload from the ship. Molly tells her senior to go on ahead alone. With a face full of admiration, Molly smiles once again. Meanwhile, in the castle courtyard, someone's practicing magic. She's pretty skilled in combat abilities, and her magic looks downright terrifying, not gonna lie. Once she stands still after her stunt, Ash sneaks up behind and covers her friend's eyes with her hands. The girl gets annoyed at Ash's sneaky move. And well, this girl is none other than Tilly Wimbledon herself. The two ladies greet each other with a warm, welcome home, and clasp hands like they're in love. Ash then asks her friend if she just summoned a flash of lightning a moment ago, wondering if it was her new magic ability. Tilly clarifies that it wasn't a new magic ability, it actually came from a magic stone. She takes off her glove and offers it to Ash, explaining that the stone enhances magic power and produces a different effect as a byproduct. Excited, Ash immediately wears the glove embedded with the stone. Tilly encourages her to give it a try, instructing her to imagine pouring her magic into the stone and releasing it once she feels the stone can't hold any more magical power. Ash follows the instructions eagerly, focusing her magic into the gem. However, despite her efforts, the gem fails to release lightning. Tilly smiles at her friend's adorable attempt and mentions that, as extraordinary witches with their ability to detect magic, they both should pull that off quite easily compared to other sisters. She reveals that she has tried the glove with over 100 people, but only a few could grasp the concept quickly and successfully release lightning. Ash jokingly asks if Tilly is implying she's stupid, to which the girl proudly responds that she herself nailed it on her first try. So yeah, Ash is kinda stupid in comparison. Suddenly, Ash surprises Tilly by lunging at her and giving her a sweet and unexpected smooch on the lips. I have no idea where this is going, but let's roll with it and bear with me. After sharing a passionate kiss for a solid 5 panels, they finally release their lip lock, and Ash affectionately pats Tilly on the head. That is when the little one reluctantly reassures her that she's not stupid after all. Tilly turns around still pouting and reveals that she's gathered a few other witches here, each with different powers that have piqued her interest. Ash, not quite following, asks her to clarify. Tilly starts by questioning the nature of magic itself, explaining how witches' powers have always varied widely. Even if their abilities seem similar, the way they perceive and use magic can be quite different. But these mysterious stones can standardize magical abilities for anyone who uses them. For example, anyone can produce the same kind of lightning if they unleash their magic through this stone. She speculates that magic might be this all-powerful energy, and witches can tap into only one of its forms. These stones act like amplifiers for magical power, but can't generate magic by themselves. It's unclear if they're natural or man-made, but rumors suggest they were taken from lost ruins. These are the only ones she's found so far, but she's heard about an ancient ruin in the Seawind region of the Eastern Forest. She's itching to check it out herself. Lady Ash spills that before she sailed off from Clearwater Port. She heard that Garcia Wimbledon's Black Sail Fleet is on the move, heading for the Seawind region, which is Timothy's turf. She figures Garcia is aiming to use the speed of her fleet to hit their rear camps surprisingly. Tilly chimes in, worried that if they keep duking it out in Seawind, the whole place might go up in flames, and the church could swoop in on the chaos to take advantage. She's afraid that without Grey Castle united under one ruler, it'll end up like the kingdom of Everwinter, swallowed whole by the church. Suddenly, Ash notices a striking resemblance between Tilly and Roland Wimbledon, which totally freaks her out. When her friend asks what's got her stunned, Ash blurts out that Tilly looks just like Roland Wimbledon right now. The caring sister perks up at the mention of her brother, and she immediately starts grilling Ash if she met Roland, and also asks her about her trip to the Western region. Once Lady Ash spills the details of her journey, Tilly immediately asserts that the person Ash saw is not Roland Wimbledon anymore. He must have been replaced by someone else. With a serious tone, she suggests that if Roland is gathering a lot of witches, either the witches are controlling him or one of them has taken on his appearance, pretending to be him. She argues that the knowledge and intellect he's displaying couldn't have come from the court mentors. Tilly reveals that her brother was always terrible at lying, so it's impossible for him to hide his true nature. The current person can't be her stupid, annoying brother, but still, he is her brother. He's probably the least troublesome among their siblings, and expresses her intention to reach out to him. Ash mentions Maggie stayed behind but will arrive by month's end with news from Border Town. While they are waiting for Maggie, Tilly suggests they start their cleansing plan. She tells Ash they'll scrub the fjords clean of any church influence, making it a safe spot for witches. Ash playfully grabs her friend's hand, gives it a kiss, and promises to make her queen's wishes happen. The next scene shows our glamorous girl admiring herself in their newly made mirror. Others are also excited about it, giving all the credit to Soraya, who created a coating with mercury properties to make this crystal clear mirror that reflects perfectly. But Lady Lily, always confident, just shrugs, saying she's tired of seeing women always drawn to these kinds of things. That's when another sister reminds her that she's a woman too. Lily sighs and admits she is, but she points out her own lack of humanity's biggest weapons, gesturing at Wendy, who is standing nearby. Hummingbird finally understands what her friend is talking about, especially after seeing her own flat chest. While she hides behind Lily, she expresses her desire to have her hooters as huge as Sister Wendy's. Meanwhile, we also see Anna and the prince together again, this time tinkering with a microscope. The prince encourages Anna to give it a try. As Anna peers into the microscope, she's initially shocked to see something moving in the water, and a closer look reveals lots of little bugs swimming around. Everyone else gathers around, equally amazed to see what's going on. Maggie, on the other hand, is horrified and declares she won't drink water if it means consuming those creepy bugs she just saw. Lady Scroll questions if these creatures are real, prompting Prince to dive into a nerdy explanation about protists or unicellular organisms. He explains that they're living creatures, and there are even smaller ones like bacteria and viruses that also exist in water. Meanwhile, Nightingale, who always bunked her science classes, starts drinking the same contaminated water. She spits it out immediately when someone shouts that they're actually swallowing a bunch of bugs while drinking. As Sister Lily peers through the microscope, she's all curious about where Prince is picking up all these weird facts. With her ability to keep food fresh, she figures it might work on water too. But when she tries it out, bam! Her magic goes haywire, conjuring up microorganisms from nowhere that start chomping down on everything in the water, multiplying like crazy. Nightingale spots Lily's magic acting up, but before she can say anything, Lily's magic pulls a stunt, gathering into a blob that forms this weird critter. Prince takes a peek through the microscope and sees these bug-like things saluting Lily of all people. Everyone cheers Lily on for leveling up to the third evolved witch in their crew. The girl blushes and reluctantly admits that she thought she might as well understand the tiny ball theory to evolve her abilities, and it actually worked. However, she still can't wrap her head around the idea that everything in the world is made up of tiny balls. In her eyes, if steel or rock were made of tiny balls, they'd just scatter into a pile of dust. She's fascinated that the water has been purified by the little bugs Lily summoned. Prince then says the next step is individual testing. Only this way can they confirm how effective Lily's evolved ability really is. He wants to see how it performs over time and how it reacts to the Divine Stone of Judgment. If it works out, it could be a big step forward for Bordertown's medical development. After 3 days of testing her ability, Prince sorted the purple bugs Lily summoned into 2 main groups, parents and replicas. She discovered that the parents are the primary microorganisms that appear first when she uses her magical power. As long as Lily keeps them fueled with magic, they can stick around indefinitely. But if she strays more than 5 meters away, poof, they disappear on her. And if they get caught within the range of that Divine Stone of Judgment thing, they scatter like confetti. Now the replicas are a different breed. They don't give a hoot about the Divine Stone of Judgment. They're like the rebels of the microbe world. They've got bits and pieces of the parents' characteristics and love to pick fights with other bad microorganisms to keep the food from spoiling. But here's the twist. They don't stick around as long because their assimilation skills seem tied to their size. Replicas can't replicate like parents do either. They only live for 1 day and will kick the bucket immediately once the water is boiled. Prince was jazzed, saying these bugs could chow down on all sorts of nasty germs and viruses, making them a real game changer for sanitation and sterilization. After luxuriating in a bath and feeling refreshed, Lily couldn't help but chuckle, giving props to Prince for inventing showers, even though she was the first to rib him about his noble comforts back then. Once she's out, she tells Sister Moon to hit the showers too, but the girl retaliates by smacking Lily with a pillow, accusing her of being a turncoat. Lily's baffled by her friend's sudden attack, prompting Moon to remind her about how she scoffed at the tiny ball theory yet still evolved a new ability. Lily sighs and tosses the pillow back, explaining that her evolution had zilch to do with tiny balls. Even Prince said you don't have to buy into it to evolve. Moon lights up with relief, asking timidly what she should do to understand her own ability, especially since her magnetic field powers are invisible and intangible. Lily shrugs, admitting she's clueless too. She only knows what her ability looks like and understands nothing about Prince's lectures on bacteria and such. Just thinking about it gives her a headache. Prince might as well write her an entire textbook. Moon tells her to quit complaining since she's already evolved. She is afraid that if things keep going at this rate, then she will be no help to the prince at all. Lily smiles and cryptically tells her to just take a shower to figure out her ability. Confused, Moon has no idea what her friend means. To which, Lily clarifies that she should shower with Anna, which embarrasses Moon even more. Shortly after, we see the blue head finally ending up showering with Anna. She remains shy and apologizes to her senior for only being able to ask her while bathing, given how busy Anna usually is. The senior then asks what her junior wants to talk about, and points out how everyone these days, including Maggie who recently joined, is eagerly learning. Moon feels inadequate compared to everyone else's hard work, to which the senior reassures her that everyone works hard in their own way, emphasizing that witches are dedicated to understanding themselves, their abilities, and their future paths. Anna shares how Prince helped guide her, showing her that her abilities aren't just for evil purposes, but can be useful too, which led to her evolution. She advises her junior not to force herself but to keep learning at her own pace, knowing she'll progress naturally. After their serious conversation, Anna starts rubbing shampoo into Moon's head, which leaves Moon feeling totally embarrassed and awkward, especially since they had never seen shampoo before. In an attempt to reciprocate, Moon decides to rub Anna's back as well. It seems like Lady May is intrigued by the scented soap in town, and Knight Carter explains that it's a popular item used by everyone in the castle. He praises its ability to remove oil and leave a refreshing rose scent. Lady May decides to sniff the soap herself and is pleasantly surprised by its pleasant fragrance. She marvels at how such a large scented soap can be so affordable compared to the expensive perfumes in the King's City. Carter reveals that they've managed to make it more cost-effective by using different materials instead of high-priced ones. He proceeds to buy several soap blocks for her, which causes Lady May to blush slightly. Knight Carter mentions the limit of 2 bars per person but offers to ask Prince for more if needed. After receiving the soap bars, Lady May looks a bit taken aback but eventually smiles and accepts them gladly. Lady May is deep in thought while Carter is out picking a gift for her. She's mulling over her past at Longsong Fortress, where she recognized and wanted in their theaters. But she couldn't stand the idea of working in a small town like a border town which is full of folks she thinks are illiterate. Suddenly, Carter returns with the gift, and when she opens it, there is a stunning mirror, which is showing her reflection, showing her how beautiful she looks. Even Carter compliments her beauty from her recent stage performance and smoothly asks if she'd like to hang out more. Seems like Carter's head over heels, and who knows, maybe she's feeling the same. Later that evening, after their pleasant time together, Lady May sits down to write a letter to Ambassador Petrov. In it, she explains she won't be heading back to support the Honeysuckle family at the Fortress Theater. Instead, she's decided to stick around Border Town to delve deeper into her studies and broaden her horizons in her career as an actor. Seems like Carter is finally not alone anymore. Another day rolls around in Border Town, where a new knight reports that the Second Army's training is going great. They'll be ready for target practice in about a week, and during this time, he is sure that there will be plenty of decommissioned flintlocks for everyone. Meanwhile, Prince is totally lost as to who this new knight is. He turns to his advisor, bewildered, only to find out it's none other than Carter Lannis. Carter, a bit embarrassed, admits he just trimmed his beard last night. He tells them not to tease him anymore, but Prince and his advisor can't help but chuckle, wondering aloud how chasing after girls could lead a man to such drastic measures. Back to business. The prince assures everyone will get enough ammo for training and tells the knight to have veterans from the First Army supervise. Once the prince is done giving his advisor a list of tasks, the knight suggests they could make good money selling the perfumes they make using sugarcane, because he has heard that it's high price in the King's City. The prince's eyes light up with the prospect of profit, seeing it as a great opportunity to hoard some fat cash. The advisor, still standing nearby, adds that the perfume is the King's City Alchemy Association's top-secret product, with only around 1,000 produced each year, and only a fraction of those being sold. Selling it outside the King's City could mean doubling the selling price. He explains that the scented soap he produced makes bath time a lot more fun, and if they use sugarcane for making perfume, they can rake in the money by selling it to Redwater City and Fallen Dragon Ridge. The prince is blown away by how little it costs to produce the perfume. It's just a few crushed flowers, herbs, and ethanol, and yet the profits are pretty sweet. On top of perfume, they can also churn out white wine and white sugar. Even though they might not fetch as high a price as perfume, they'll still bring in some much-needed cash in bulk. With his mind made up, he gathers all the city's merchants the next day. Once Merchant Hog downs some wine down, he raves about the top-notch quality of the product. Margaret's also taken aback by the wine's punchy flavor, but she's more interested in discussing the perfume business deal, so she dives right in with her questions. She then takes the chance and leans towards the prince to drop some secret info he requested. It seems that not much has changed since Everwinter fell to the church. The Kingdom of Wolfheart put up quite a fight, supposedly halting the church's army at Broken Tooth Castle for about 2 months. Additionally, the King of Dawn reached out to Grey Castle, suspecting the church's intentions to occupy all mainland kingdoms. He proposed an alliance to expel the church forces and cooperate in defeating Hermes' holy city. The prince quickly asks Margaret about the King's City's response to this proposal. In response, she sighs and reveals that under Timothy's advice, Prime Minister Marquis Wyke rejected the proposal. That chubby one sure has some weighty news. He mentions that Timothy is currently occupied in the eastern region with his men, suggesting he might not be able to focus on other matters. There's also word of a large fleet landing in the Seawind region, led by Garcia Wimbledon, wreaking havoc along the shoreline. They've plundered everything in sight, including churches and many merchants from the fjords becoming victims. Margaret adds that numerous refugees have appeared in the eastern regions, with her caravan taking in many of them. These raiders not only stole valuables, but also took lives and burned anything they couldn't carry, which she believes will deal a heavy blow to Timothy, who had just managed to subdue the nobles in the area. The prince is concerned about the refugees and asks Margaret for details. She explains that compared to refugees from Everwinter or Wolfheart, those from Grey Castle are less likely to want to sell themselves into slavery. Prince clarifies that he doesn't want slaves. He just wants to provide food and shelter for those willing to stay in Border Town. When he learns there are around 10,000 refugees, mostly women and children, gathering outside the King's City, he immediately orders his men to screen them. He asks if they need permission from King's City officials to transport the refugees, but the chubby man assures him it's unnecessary, as overcrowding could lead to food shortages and riots in the city. Margaret offers ships to transport the refugees and strikes a deal with the prince, shaking hands to adjust the cost against the steam engines she bought from him. Outside, everyone is offering their food and spices gladly to Maggie, who's about to depart for the fjords. She's teary-eyed seeing such generosity and probably doesn't even want to leave, promising to return very soon. Prince then hands over a letter to her, saying it's for Princess Tilly. The little girl eagerly accepts the mission, pledging to fulfill it no matter what. Nightingale is intrigued that he's reaching out to his sister. He explains he wrote in the letter about his desire for cooperation and asked her to send a few support-type witches to assist with Border Town's construction. In the letter, he didn't refer to himself as her brother but as the ruler of the Western region. Lightning, her best buddy, asks what if the other witches don't let her come back to Border Town. In response, Maggie confidently says she'll fly back without telling anyone. With the deal sealed, our playful girls exchange a sisterly fist bump before parting ways. Prince feels a sense of accomplishment knowing Maggie is now on their side after just a month. As Maggie flies off with her load of products, Prince wishes her a safe journey. Meanwhile, Lily wonders if she's gained a little weight, and Lightning, who's been making her eat all that food, quickly catches on that it's probably her fault. The scene shifts to a sailing ship carrying Margaret and Theo, the representative sent by Prince Roland. Margaret asks the boy if he was born in the King's City, and he confirms that he grew up there before becoming a castle guard. She then asks how it feels to return home, to which Theo responds that he'd rather stay in Border Town because he admires Prince Roland very much. She then teases him, asking what he knows about the prince, to which he stares blankly, unsure of how to respond. Margaret mentions that Prince Roland is an amazing person, but he had a bad reputation in the King's City. She asks if Theo heard the rumors about him, but notes that in Border Town he's nothing like those rumors. He's a well-behaved, thoughtful gentleman with a wealth of knowledge. Theo shrugs, admitting he doesn't know either, speculating that perhaps Prince Roland was hiding his true self all along. As they chat, they finally arrive at the King's City, and Theo is confused by the commotion outside the walls. He asks Margaret about the gathered people there. She explains that these people are currently being fed, but she's uncertain if they will continue to receive food indefinitely. The strong ones will likely be chosen by nobles, while the weak and old might be left behind. Margaret asks if he plans to use his men to advertise and recruit people, but he explains it would be ineffective and draw too much attention. Instead, he suggests she take his men with her and reveals he's already figured out a plan. To get things done, you either deal with annoying officials or hire people known as rats to handle it. Once alone, he reveals to us that in the past when he joined the castle guard, he used to be part of the patrol team, responsible for shady tasks passed on to an underground organization called the Rats. These rats do all the dirty work of the kingdom to keep things in balance. He plans to approach them through middlemen to see if they'll take on the job. As he walks, he notices some girls hanging at the gallows, but soon reaches the middleman who hooks him up with the rats. The middleman introduces Theo to the group, which includes a young girl and someone named Fox. Theo is surprised to see someone from a respected family involved in such shady activities. The middleman explains that Fox lost all his money gambling, sold everything, and ran away with someone else, leaving his wife behind. Theo takes a seat and gets straight to the point. He tells them about the city's plan to reduce food relief for refugees, which could lead to riots. He emphasizes that kicking people out will be harder if unrest grows in the city. The middleman then asks what they're supposed to do next. Theo simply states they need to spread the word that the western region is reclaiming uninhabited lands, and the local lord welcomes refugees. He tells them to make it sound as realistic as possible and insists on spreading the word that mercenaries and fleets will arrive here in 3 days to scare off the people. Another person chimes in, saying that if there are no mercenaries, people won't believe the rumor no matter how plausible it sounds. Theo assures them that mercenaries will come, and someone asks loudly if there really is actually anyone in the western region willing to take them in. The middleman bonks the person's head, reminding him that's exactly why they're trying to lure people to the western region. He tells everyone that his boss is loaded with cash, so they'll all get a fat paycheck if they do the job right. Everyone's pumped to hear this and eager to get started. A boy asks if the little sister will be joining in. In response, she confidently says she doesn't even need anyone's help for this job. The boy reminds her that the king has ordered soldiers and knights to execute witches on sight, putting every woman at risk of being caught by the guards. After all, they'd rather wrongly kill people than let them go. Theo's mind clicks as he remembers the girls he saw hanging at the gallows outside the city. They were all witches. He starts praying for Prince Roland to become king as soon as possible because he's the only one who can clean up this mess. The news of a ship sailing to the western region has already spread, and everyone is considering migrating there. While these two ladies are excited about the prospect of heading west, the little girl notices something on her palm. A black spot beginning to appear. Suddenly, chaos erupts in the tents as people start groaning in pain. A strange disease-like thing spreads over their bodies, and they beg not to die. Outside the church, a horde of people gathers as priests preach about how witches are causing this infection. They promise to eradicate witches, and assure the distressed crowd that the church will not stand idly by. The priest announces that the church has developed a holy medicine. Hope sparks among the people again, but the priest takes his chance and urges them to devote themselves entirely to the church to receive it. The desperate people quickly show their willingness to give everything to the church for salvation, and they do not even bother to question this bastard's words. Back with our duo, Margaret finds it suspicious that witches could be responsible for this plague. After all, the Divine Stone of Judgment can quickly neutralize witch powers. If it weren't for that, the entire region around the holy city of Hermes would have been wiped out long ago. The first victim was found lying by the roadside, covered in those ominous black spots. He looked almost like a corpse. It appears this is the same poison the Pope told to Priest Maine, the one meant to be used over King City. It spreads simply through a rotting corpse traveling through air, and can affect anyone without needing to be ingested. No wonder only the church has a cure for this. These two have no clue about the disease, so they are brainstorming what it could be. Theo mentions that no herbal treatments worked, and their blood turned entirely black for some reason. He reveals that some refugees outside the city, and even those he sent on ships to the border town, have caught the same disease. He explains that due to the rats' selfish choices, they unknowingly put infected people on the ships too. He doesn't blame them though, as he had only informed them about working with nobles of the king's city to relocate refugees out of the city, so they naturally included the infected for the city's safety. Theo tells her he's stopped moving refugees for now, but those ships already sailing might still have infected people. So he tells her to report back to Prince Roland that infected folks are coming their way, so they should get ready. The lady assures she's got it covered since messages spread like wildfire among merchants. Meanwhile, on the boat with refugees, people are feeling sick. We spot the same girl from earlier on board, with another girl giving her water. A man warns the girl not to get too close to the sick girl because the marks have spread to her neck and she doesn't have long. He's convinced they're all doomed, which makes the girl cry. Even some of the crew transporting them have caught the infection. Despite the despair, the lady believes they'll be saved once they reach the western region. A man bursts in, claiming it's all useless no matter where they go. Another man intervenes, saying it won't be useless because they have Prince Roland on their side. The next scene takes us to the border town where Knight Carter is rallying the soldiers, urging them not to let their guard down because Eastern region refugees will soon be arriving. Prince Roland is equally serious about the urgency, especially after learning that there are sick people coming to border town, and he has already prepared for it. Lily has also mastered the disinfection process and is eager to help cure the arriving sick people. Infirmary camps have been set up in advance, and the infected individuals from the ships have arrived. They are escorted into tents where Sister Lily treats them with utmost caution. To prevent fear and maintain safety, the victims are blindfolded so they cannot see Lily, who works diligently behind a counter. Prince has also implemented a system to keep victims from getting close to Lily, ensuring they're treated safely from the other side of a counter. The first patient is a native soldier from the border town who was aboard the ship. The girl, Lily, immediately begins her healing process, with Prince watching attentively. Once she's done, Roland asks if she is finished, and Lily confirms that she has. He then asks the patient how he feels. The soldier initially says he feels kind of good, but then he's absolutely shocked when he realizes it was Prince Roland who spoke to him. The soldier immediately salutes the prince with a big smile on his face, expressing how amazing he feels. Turning to Lily, Prince Roland seeks clarification. She explains that the symptoms aren't typical of the plague. The black spots are from sepsis, causing cyanosis. Even after killing off the Yersinia pestis bacteria, these spots take time to fade back to normal. The prince tells him to gather up the other soldiers and send them about 10 at a time. The soldier nods appreciatively, thanking Nana for her healing. But Prince Roland corrects him, saying it's Lily, not Nana, as Nana deals with injuries where there's bleeding. Hearing this, the soldier quickly shows his respect to Sister Lily, which deeply moves her. It's probably the first time she looks so relaxed and natural, as she usually acts like a stubborn brat. But then again, she turns to her usual stubborn self while blushing slightly. She insists she doesn't need any credit. But Prince Roland teases her, asking why she's blushing so much then. The prince gives her a good old pat, and that's when Nightingale enters the scene, telling them she just witnessed a strange phenomenon. She explains that there were signs of magic in the blood of those people, and the prince is quite startled to hear this. Nightingale continues, describing how in the fog it looked like stars in the sky, something she'd never seen with such small magical glows before. While the prince examines the things under the microscope, he sees these mucus-filled little bugs. Nightingale reveals that since anything related to magic is either caused by witches or something to do with the church, she can bet her life that this is the church's doing, much like those pills. Meanwhile, Lily's bugs immediately attack these mucus-filled pests and start devouring them. The prince also set up a second building where Nana could treat severely wounded patients. He's confident they can handle this epidemic with their two talented girls. He hopes they can soon stand on stage, receiving the applause they deserve instead of quietly healing in those boxes. Suddenly, the prince notices Nightingale dozing off. When he tries to snap her out, she starts rambling about seemingly unrelated things. With a bright smile, she reveals that the witch union will soon have a new member. As dusk settles, we see the same girl sitting on the ground. A soldier kindly offers her some food, and she thanks him warmly. She's still a bit puzzled about having to wear a blindfold before going into the tent. But after getting that mysterious treatment, she and the others are feeling a lot better. Tears of joy well up in her eyes as she's grateful that everything's going okay now. She just wants to keep living like this, because their lives were so tough before, especially losing both her mom and dad. All she wants now is to stay alive with her sister. Well, it seems like one of the girls from these two is a witch, and that is precisely why Nightingale hinted about the new witch joining them soon. Right on cue, she appears behind the sisters. Nightingale introduces herself as a witch, which fascinates the girl, who reciprocates to the gesture and introduces herself as Lucia White, and she immediately expresses her desire to join the Witch Association. Nightingale agrees and offers to take her home, mentioning that Prince Roland wants to meet her as well. Later that night in the castle, we see Prince examining these materials before him, which seem related to Lucia's abilities. Although the specifics of her powers are unclear, she used a cup to demonstrate her abilities. She worries she may have damaged the cup, but the prince reassures her and asks if she can do the same with other objects. Before she can respond, her stomach grumbles loudly, causing her embarrassment. Nightingale smiles and decides to grab some food before diving back into the nerdy stuff. The prince decides to throw a feast for her, and later that night, all the witches gather around the table ready to enjoy the meal. Wendy officially welcomes Lucia into the union, and everyone gathers around her warmly, which melts the girl's heart right away. Wendy offers her some grilled meat, mentioning Anna's skill at grilling, encouraging Lucia to give it a try. Meanwhile, Lightning makes sure to serve her fine wine, insisting she enjoy as much as she wants. Wendy then pats her on the shoulder and tells her she can call on her if she needs anything. Lucia feels deeply touched to see everyone so lively here compared to the harsh outside world. She can't help but feel a sense of warmth, as if she has finally come home. Meanwhile, we're back with the other sister who has just woken up from her nap. Lucia immediately asks how she's feeling, to which the little one meekly replies that she's really hungry. The older sister assures her to wait there, as she'll be right back with the grilled fish Nightingale gave her. Suddenly, the girl realizes she's not on the ship anymore. Her sister explains they've arrived at their destination in the western region, the border town. The witches under the Lord have also cured her, and she reveals they're in the castle right now. She tells her sister that everyone here treats her very well, no matter who they are, and they don't see her as an outsider. She even mentions that this place has things called bathrooms, and Nightingale was the one who bathed her while she was unconscious. While her sister munches on those dried fishes, her sister gladly tells her how things are in the border town. The younger one teasingly asks if she'll be sleeping with the prince now that she's working for him. This gets the older sister angry, and she starts pinching the poor girl, demanding to know who taught her such things. The junior sister quickly spills out that it was their mother who told her, and this is precisely why she never let father take beautiful maids at home. Seems like their father had a reputation as a playboy back in his day. Speaking of parents, Lucia remembers them for a moment and feels sad that ever since they died, she never had anywhere to belong. Now that she can stay here, she worries that her abilities won't be useful to Prince Roland. Even though she can supposedly restore objects, whenever she uses her ability, it often ends up destroying other people's hard work. She even turned the prince's cup into a pile of different substances. It seems like her skill leans more towards reverse engineering rather than restoring objects, but they appears to be using restore term as restoring the stuff to its original form, not fixing the broken. Right now she's worried that if Prince Roland deems her abilities useless, he might just kick both of them out of the castle. The next day arrives, and there are various random objects laid out before Lucia. The prince asks her to try restoring the first one. She gladly complies and uses her magic power right away. Meanwhile, Nightingale can't help but notice Prince Roland's rather happy face today. To which Prince admits he's thrilled because with Lucia's abilities, they might actually make some tangible progress in the smelting and manufacturing industry. He starts delving into technical details that even Nightingale finds a bit snoozeworthy. Once Lucia is done with the first object, Roland tells her to try restoring grapes and steak, and he jokingly reminds her to restore some steam buns before Nightingale devours everything. The girl laughs at their banter and jumps right in to use her powers on them too. When she's done, she admits she's totally out of magical juice. Meanwhile, the prince checks out the steam buns she just fixed up. He explains that after steaming, the gluten proteins go through some irreversible changes in high heat. So even if you grind it back to powder, it won't be as smooth as it was. Despite this, she managed to turn the flour back to its original form. Then he looks at the iron ingot and realizes if her power was just about restoring, it should have turned into iron ore. Instead, it broke down into iron powder and some other gunk. And as for the steak and grapes, there's no change. Seems like she might struggle with organic stuff or composition of living beings. From these tests, he figures her power has two sides to it, and it all depends on what she knows. Nightingale also gives her props for her impressive powers, even though she's not even an adult yet and hasn't been through the whole coming-of-age thing. The prince immediately offers her a job contract, detailing everything it includes. Lucia doesn't pay much attention to the specifics. She's just thrilled to be staying here with her sister, even if she has no clue what her job actually entails. The prince reassures her that her role here isn't just about her ability. The witch union always supports its members, and everyone has unique talents. He's confident she'll find her place. A few days later, they're all in the council room hashing out plans for a battle against the king's city. He warns it's going to be different this time, since they will be fighting this war in an unfamiliar territory, so he tells everyone to be extremely cautious. He lays out the map, pointing to the red square in the middle representing the king's city and the blue lines representing the canals. He assigns two main tasks. First, to protect the witches and heal the refugees, then safely return them to the border town. Second, to prevent the epidemic from spreading into the king's city. He explains they'll set up a lookout post on a high point outside the city overlooking the ports. The soldiers will disguise themselves as caravan mercenaries to help the cured refugees board ships. Lily is put in charge of curing the infected. Everyone will gather river water, and she'll purify it to distribute to the sick. He stresses two big things. First, everyone boarding the ship needs to have already drunk the purified water. Second, don't ever use boiled water to make the purified stuff. Funny thing is, the dirtier the water, the better. Because that way, it will have more bad microorganisms that will get replaced with Lily's microorganisms during the purification process. He reveals that the epidemic was caused by the church, and the disease started spreading in the king's city. The church claims to have a cure, but ironically refuses to distribute it to the city residents, just because they want to appear as saviors while deceiving everyone. He declares they'll also work to dismantle the church's propaganda. He's confident everything will go smoothly this time, and he's ready to take these guys down for good. It's just a matter of time before he gets to them. Theo arrives at the king's city and tells Margaret straight up that the prince wants to move all the infected refugees back to the western region. He asks her to provide a large number of ships for continuous transport, rather than just one or two fleets, because he is aiming to have all refugees in the border town within 3 days. Margaret calls it ridiculous. Even if half of these people die here, there will still be at least 5,000 left. Transporting them all in 3 days would require nearly 100 sailing ships. She explains that even if they used all the ships in the Chamber of Commerce, it would cost thousands of gold royals. Even the steam engines couldn't cover such expenses, and as a merchant, she's not willing to take such a big loss. Well, looks like the prince saw this coming. So, Theo hands her a letter from our hero, laying out all the details about the cost. Theo also explains that if they can't get everyone out in 3 days, the church might swoop in and things could get messy. After Margaret reads the letter, she jumps straight to the point, asking about the timeline. Theo looks puzzled for a moment, wondering what she means. With a little smile, Margaret politely asks when they need to have all the ships ready to go. Not sure what was in that letter, but it must have been something good to make this greedy fox accept the term so quickly. The scene shifts to the fjords, where the church's outposts are under attack by the witches. Leading the charge is Lady Ash and her squad of sweet little ladies. After spotting the arrows being shot, Ash informs her crew they're anti-demon arrows, so they need to clean up fast. With that in mind, she leaps into the air without warning, soaring high enough to reach the soldiers on the wall. With a single swing of her sword, she wipes them out like it's nobody's business. She continues slashing left and right, cutting down everyone in her path without a care in the world. One of the knights tries to track her with a specially made arrow, but he gets his eye ripped out by a fat black crow who suspiciously resembles Maggie. The other girls come rushing back to join the fight, and Ash rallies her friends, reminding them that once they clear out every priest from the fjords, there will be no one left to mock the witches with their laughable beliefs. Soon after, Ash has wiped out the entire church. A jar of pills rolls across the ground as our black beauty hovers before the knight who lost his hand which was holding that jar. He calls her a demon, a term she certainly doesn't appreciate given the church's persecution of witches. In response, she swings her sword and cuts him down without hesitation. With the area now confirmed clear of enemies, the other witches ask if she's cleared out the entire area too. She smiles and confirms that it's over. She declares that even though the outposts around the fjords didn't house thousands of soldiers or a judgment army, but by eliminating them all, they've carved out a place for their existence and won the battle. Everyone bursts into happiness, celebrating their hard-earned victory. Back at Sleeping Island, Princess Tilly is absolutely thrilled to hear the good news about the successful annihilation of the church, and she reveals to her friend that this news had already been delivered to her by Maggie. Ash nods, noting that Maggie can actually fly faster than ships can sail. She then asks where Maggie is now, to which Princess Tilly reveals that she's already left for the western region without even waiting. Tilly explains that Maggie has made a friend over there, and if it weren't for the battle against the church, she would have already reached Bordertown by now. Tilly admits that after hearing so much about them, she's genuinely curious and wants to meet them at any cost. Ash wonders if she made a mistake letting Maggie stay there, but Princess Tilly reassures her, saying she actually did a great job. The only reason they're able to communicate with the other side is because of Maggie. She also mentions that she has sent her response letter to Roland Wimbledon, and she asks Ash how she thinks she responded. Her friend confidently states that she surely denied giving any witches to him, since sailing the sea itself is dangerous. To her surprise, Princess Tilly says that's wrong, causing Ash to choke on her tea. Tilly explains that she agreed to his request and even briefly introduced the abilities of support-type witches in the letter, and she is willing to send a few witches to Bordertown. Tilly happily states that it's for the sake of exploration and knowledge, and they should strengthen their friendship and move forward together. But still, her friend expresses her disagreement, to which the princess further reminds her that since they both hate the church, forming a friendship with Roland's group is an added strength. She insists that if they are friends, they should be kind to each other. Additionally, according to Maggie's report, a witch can further evolve her abilities through the acquisition of knowledge. By sending witches to study would really help Sleeping Island out. Ash still insists going there would be risky, but Tilly quickly reassures her she won't go until she confirms everything. She also brings up Sister Sylvie's knack for seeing through disguises, whether it's makeup or magical illusions, which means they can easily uncover Roland's true identity. Most importantly, Tilly trusts Ash, and she is sure that her friend will always be by her side no matter the danger. Ash stays quiet, not sure how to convince her, while the princess decides to postpone further discussion until Maggie arrives with her reports. Right now, she's got other important stuff to focus on. Lady Ash then curiously asks what she's talking about, and Princess spills the beans that outside the mainland lies Shadow Island within Fjord's boundaries, a place where most of the magic stones they've acquired come from. Now that the church is out of the picture, Tilly wants to personally check out these ruins and see what they're all about. Upon hearing the mention of Shadow Island, her friend then asks if she is talking about the ruins known as the legendary Ghost Red River. If yes, she explains how these ruins vanish and reappear in the sea, with dangerous currents and sea monsters all around, making it super tricky for anyone to get near. She mentions plenty of explorers have bitten the dust on Shadow Island just chasing after this wild phenomenon, so she's not sure how they'll tackle exploring those ruins. Princess Tilly then spills that there's an outsider explorer chilling right here on Sleeping Island. He's the one who first stumbled upon those ruins, so he is definitely going to lead the path for them. Before we can watch Princess Tilly's journey to the ruins, the scene shifts to the King's City, where we see a few people outside the city walls. These folks appear to be refugees, afflicted by the same curse-like plague spread by the church. Lady Echo feels really sorry for them, because these people are refugees from the eastern region who didn't get the chance to board the ships sailing back to Bordertown, and the church didn't even bother to give them medicine and just threw them out to die. Thin Mustache decides to gather everyone who can still move and tells Lady Echo to take them to safety. She quickly uses her magical voice, announcing that she has come to cure them under the command of the Western Region leader, Roland Wimbledon. She assures the desperate crowd that their ship is at the docks, where people have medicine to cure everyone free of charge. Thin Mustache is amazed to see how her voice is reaching everyone's voice, even though she is not even speaking vocally with words. The people quickly perk up at this news and stand up. Even the lady suffering from illness rises, eager to be saved. She promises to go to the Western region if it means being cured. Thin Mustache flashes a pleasant grin and tells everyone they can bring their families as well. A while later, we see a bunch of water skins containing the medicine. The soldiers quickly tell the gathered refugees to drink the medicine inside the bottles, and they will be cured immediately. Without a second thought, the desperate people grab the water skins and chug down the water. As they do, a soldier preaches that the rumor about witches spreading this plague is total bullcrap circulated by the church, which is meant to make people beg and kneel before the church. He tells them that not only did Roland provide the medicine, but he's not even charging a single copper for it. Everyone's stunned and having a hard time believing it, because this just feels too good to be true. But then, one of the seriously sick women says she's already feeling better after drinking that potion, and the marks on her body have vanished. The crowd goes wild with joy, and cheers fill the air as they celebrate their salvation. The soldier then explains that Roland Wimbledon is busy developing the western region and needs a bunch of people to help with farms, building houses, and paving roads. He says those who agree to move there will get food and shelter as compensation. He also promises that everyone will get a job suited to their skills, and lets them know they'll be leaving in 3 days, so they should head to the ships if they want to go to the western region. The crowd bursts into cheers once again, and eagerly says they're ready to work for Prince Roland. Thin Mustache is glad that everything is going smoothly, and what's even more surprising is that Margaret is also helping by arranging ships. Not gonna lie, I'm curious about why she agreed to help and what our boy offered her to make such a greedy merchant lend a hand. Thin Mustache then asks about the wine barrels scattered around. Theo explains that they're used to store Miss Lily's purified water. It's an easier way to get the water into the city since the walls are tightly guarded and shut to prevent mass riots by refugees. He puffs up his chest and proudly reveals that they're using the capital's side doors, which are still open for merchants, and it's all thanks to the links he has with the King's City's guards. Just then, 2 soldiers show up, and Captain Brian quickly asks them what's up. The guard reports that Miss Lightning, who's on scout duty, said someone jumped ship to escape and they're probably a rat hiding in disguise. Well, it looks like this poor rat's escape didn't go too well, and he is now getting grilled by Captain Ironaxe about who he is and who sent him. The guy quickly reveals he's not their enemy. He quickly introduces himself as Hill Fox and claims Theo knows who he is. Well, it seems like it's actually the same guy Theo met before, and back then, he was introduced as a gambler who lost everything in gambling. Right on cue, Theo shows up and fills Ironaxe in, saying that Fox is a newly recruited rat who was supposed to spread information. Theo didn't expect him to infiltrate